I woke up with 60 minutes left to live, and a customer service voice in my head asking if I'd like to hear about an exciting opportunity. Not a metaphor. There was an actual timer floating in the corner of my vision, counting down from 60 minutes, attached to an actual voice that sounded like it had a headset and a quota. It called itself ILI, the Childbirth Points System, and it laid out the deal with the enthusiasm of someone selling me a gym membership. 1 point equals 1 day of life. Points come from having babies. The more talented the baby, the more points. Rack up 100 million and I could have my grand prize, rebirth back on Earth. I'd like to tell you I negotiated. I did not. It's hard to negotiate when you're lying in a strange forest, in a strange body, white hair, red eyes, arms like chopsticks, with 58 minutes left on your personal doomsday clock. For the record, I was already dead once. Shot, actually. Long story, terrible boyfriend. We'll get there. So when the universe handed me door number 2, even door number 2 with a pregnancy requirement stapled to it, I took the door. The system helpfully explained the local rules. This was the beast world. Everyone here is an orc, beast on the inside, gorgeous human on the outside, because apparently this world was designed by someone with priorities. 20 males for every female. A female who can have children is treated like a national treasure. A female who can't is shipped off to a place called Way Cave, which I will describe only as the worst place, and move on because we have 56 minutes. Host, there is a male nearby, Eileen said. Dying, compatibility confirmed. Cool, very cool. My first romantic prospect in this world was a corpse in progress. He was lying in a burned out hollow, a beast man charred so badly I couldn't tell you his hair color. Breathing the way you breathe when your body is mostly done with the whole breathing project. Big guy, even wrecked. You could tell he'd been built like a fortress before someone set the fortress on fire. I swallowed the free pregnancy pill from the system store. 100% conception rate. The single most terrifying consumer product I've ever encountered. And I'll spare you the details because there are none to share. Deadpan version. With 3 seconds left on my death clock, the timer stopped. Pregnancy achieved. Life support activated. The clock froze mid-tick like it was annoyed at me for winning. I patted the dying stranger on his least burned shoulder, said thank you for your service, and walked away to go find civilization. And that's when the corpse got up. I looked back exactly once. The burned husk of a man was gone. In its place stood a black panther the size of a truck, golden eyes glowing, wounds knitting shut as I watched, staring at my white hair like he was memorizing it. I did what any reasonable dead woman in a new world would do. I walked faster. The rat tribe of the West District took me in, and by took me in, I mean I committed light identity fraud. The system had dug up my cover story. This body was the secret daughter of a rat clan hunter named Hu Lei, from a female he'd loved and lost years ago. I walked into the village, said the magic words, and watched a middle-aged beast man drop his jerky stall and burst into tears. He sniffed the air once, bloodline scent apparently, the local DNA test, and that was it. My daughter. Full waterworks. I now had a father. Here's the thing I wasn't ready for. Hu Lei didn't ask what I could do for him. He asked if I was hungry. In a world where females are basically walking lottery tickets, this broke, hunched, jerky-selling old rat looked at the scrawniest female in the district, and his first instinct was to feed me. My real father sold me to a debt collector when I was 9, so yes, I decided on the spot, this one's mine now, I'm keeping him. I also acquired a brother, Li Gang, gentle, herb-gathering, would apologize to a rock if he tripped on it, and a village-wide audience because a new female shows up about as often as a comet. Which brings us to Chen Wei, local golden boy, strongest young hunter in the tribe, earth talent, shoulders like a load-bearing wall, and the smug aura of a man who has never once been told no. He took one look at me and decided I was his. Not asked, decided. He strutted up with that "you're welcome" smile and informed me I was lucky he'd noticed me. Sir, I have died before. Your jawline does not frighten me. Then came the coming-of-age ceremony, which is the beast world's version of a job fair, except the job is wife. Every young female stands before the tribe and touches the fertility stone, a sacred rock that glows based on your baby-making potential. The witch's granddaughter Chloe went first. The stone lit up like a festival. Exceptional. The chief's daughter Brenda got a respectable glow. Excellent. The crowd cheered accordingly. Males started mentally drafting dowry budgets. Everyone had a lovely time. Then I touched the stone. Nothing. Not a flicker. Not a spark. The rock looked at my transmigrated, technically deceased soul and gave me the geological equivalent of a shrug. The crowd went so quiet I could hear my new father's heart breaking. 0 fertility means one destination in this world, and it isn't a husband. So I talked. I'd been a saleswoman on Earth back when I was alive the first time, and I have never pitched harder in either of my lives. The stone measures the body, I said. But I was raised in the wilds, half-starved, feed me for a season and test me again. Delay, defer, appeal the ruling. The elders, who had never seen a female argue her own fertility case like a lawyer with a countdown timer, were too stunned to refuse. Verdict. Pending. And then Chen Wei, bless his enormous confident heart, made it all irrelevant. He shoved through the crowd, dumped a pouch at my feet, and announced he was claiming me regardless. The pouch held 16 high-grade crystal coins, 1.6 million in red coins. The village made a sound like a kettle. That was more wealth than the rat tribe saw in a decade, thrown at the feet of the girl the rock had just rejected. I looked down at the fortune. I looked up at the smuggest face in the West District. And because I demanded a proper dowry earlier as a stalling tactic, matriarch rules, the female keeps the assets, I did the only sensible thing. I kept the money. Him, I put on layaway. The monsters attacked 5 days later, and they attacked wrong. Warcraft beasts hit frontier tribes sometimes. That's normal. That's Tuesday. What's not normal is wolves with glowing red eyes moving in formation, like someone was piloting them. What's really not normal is a bear 3 stories tall walking through our palisade with a shimmering dome of force around it. A domain. Wild animals do not have domains. That's like finding a raccoon in your trash with air support. A hunter named Dylan found out first, and by found out, I mean he was eaten in front of everyone, which set the tone. Chen Wei carved into the wolves like the tribe's one-man army he was, and then the domain bear cornered him against the rocks, and I watched the strongest male in the district realize he was about to die. Fetus protection protocol available, said Ai Li. Emergency teleport, 50 points per use. 50 points is 50 days of my life. I'd like the record to show I did the math and did it anyway. The world hiccuped, and Chen Wei and I were standing at the forest's edge, half a mountain away from the screaming. He looked at me. I prepared a lie. He didn't ask. He pressed the dowry pouch into my hands, told me to stay put, and ran back toward the tribe, toward the domain bear, toward the controlled wolves, without a shred of hesitation. Smug, arrogant, insufferable, and the first person in 2 lifetimes to walk into death for me without an invoice. He didn't come back. Not that night. Not in 5 days. I sat at the edge of that forest, eating through my supplies, one hand on a belly that was growing at fantasy novel speed. And when the last strip of jerky was gone, I stood up, said several unkind words to the universe, and walked into the woods. The woods contained the panther. Of course they contained the panther. He found me on day 1, late-term pregnant by then, because Beast World gestation runs on fast-forward, waddling through monster territory like a snack with legs. The truck-sized black cat stepped out of the shadows, golden eyes glowing, and I made peace with my gods. Both sets, earth and local. Then he dropped a fish at my feet. A fresh fish. Grilled would have been asking too much, sure. He watched me until I ate it, then picked me up by the back of my dress like a kitten and carried me. He can talk, by the way, Ai Li mentioned, casually, like this wasn't a headline. Lightning talent, very high rank, possibly Eastern District. Eastern District, where the elites live. What a lightning rank aristocrat was doing playing forest bodyguard for a rat girl, the system did not say, and he wasn't taking questions. The Panther arc has a middle I skipped, and the middle is the reason I never quite managed to stay angry at him. 3 days is a long time to be carried by an apex predator. The first day I spent planning escapes. I had 4, all of them stupid, all of them premised on a creature that could not outrun a heavily pregnant rat, which was not the creature I had. The second day I spent taking inventory of my captor, because you can learn a great deal about someone who thinks you cannot hear him think. He hunted at dusk and brought back more than he ate. He tested every stream before letting me near it. When my ankles swelled, he found a hollow with a warm rock in it and sat there for 6 hours doing nothing, which for a predator is the equivalent of building a house. And on the second night, when a pack of something with too many joints came sniffing along the ridge, he did not fight them. He moved me, carefully, silently, uphill, into wind, and only when we were somewhere defensible did he go back down and make the noises that ended the conversation. Anyone can fight for you. Relocating you first is love with logistics. The third day, he talked. One word, gravel rough, out of a mouth not built for it, testing whether the thing he was carrying understood language. Cold? I said no. He said nothing else for 4 hours and then brought me a second fish, and I laughed until I cried, which he did not understand and tolerated anyway. That night, my son decided it was time. The system flipped into self-delivery mode, which is exactly as advertised. A calm voice giving instructions in the dark to a woman with no midwife, no medicine, and no plan. There is a version of this scene where I am brave. In the real version, I swore at a system, a forest, a panther, a dead boyfriend, and a god I did not yet believe in that order, for 6 hours. He did not leave. He paced the perimeter of that hollow all night. I could hear the rhythm of it, out and back, the same 11-second circuit, and every time I went quiet for too long, the pacing stopped, and every time I made noise, it resumed. That is the entire text of what he said to me during my first childbirth, an 11-second circuit maintained until dawn. Congratulations, host, son, gold-eyed Black Panther beast, Geon rank lightning talent. Reward, 1,000 points. 1,000 points. Nearly 3 years of life earned in one screaming night. And I did not look at the number because there was a damp, black-haired cub the size of a loaf of bread on my chest, gold eyes cracking open, one paw closing around my finger with the total confidence of something that has never been dropped. I had been a corpse a few weeks earlier. I was somebody's whole world now. The point economy could take the night off. I bought back 500 days of lifespan while my hands were still shaking, unlocked the store for 200, swallowed the recovery pill, and fell asleep with my son under my chin and a giant cat sitting at the mouth of the hollow with his back to us, facing out. I woke up alone. No cub, no panther, just flattened grass where a truck-sized animal had been sitting all night, a fish laid out on a leaf where I could reach it without standing, and a trail of enormous paw prints heading east into the trees. The fish is the part that took me 10 years to forgive. He left me breakfast. He took my son, and he left me breakfast. In his defense, which I would not hear for a long time, he thought he was leaving me inside a barrier and coming back within the hour. By the time he did, the barrier was broken and I was gone. We spent the next 2 years each mourning a person who was busy being alive somewhere else. That morning, though, all I had was arithmetic. A burned corpse man I had used to beat my death clock. A healing panther who appeared minutes later staring at my hair. Same animal. The father had come back for what was his, waited politely through the delivery, and repossessed my child. I sat in the flattened grass and smiled. Big, bright saleswoman smile. The one I use when a deal explodes in my face. If you had walked past, you would have thought I was fine. I was not fine. Write it down, cat. This isn't over. The tribe, when I limped back, was gone. Evacuated after the attack. Nothing left but empty burrows and one gift from the system for hitting my first birth milestone. A gift pack. I opened it expecting weapons. I got a fire talent manual, a maternity dress, a sack of salt, baby formula, feeding bottles, and a frying pan. A frying pan. My apocalypse survival kit was a housewife starter set. Lee sounded genuinely proud. The store itself had unlocked too. Pills, weapons, techniques, all priced in days of my life, plus a luxury tab where a single embroidered robe cost 300 points. 300 days of my existence for a jacket. Even the afterlife has designer markups. But buried in the junk drawer of that gift was the actual jackpot. The fire manual worked. Females in this world don't awaken talents. Ever. It's the law of nature here, right up there with gravity. And yet there I was, in the ruins of my tribe, holding a handful of green flame like a birthday candle from hell. The first person to see it was my brother Li Gong, who'd come back searching for me. He watched the fire dance across my palm, dropped his herb basket, and did the full, open-mouthed statue routine. "Sister," he finally whispered, "what are you?" Broke, widowed by a cat, and flammable. Next question. Li Gong carried me to the tribe's new settlement in Rabbit Clan territory, and the reunion with Hu Lei involved more crying than I've personally done at funerals, my funeral included. The gossip caught me up fast. Chen Wei was alive, married, and a father-to-be. While I'd been in the forest being widowed by a panther, Chloe the witch's granddaughter had slipped him an aphrodisiac fruit, gotten exactly what she wanted, and gotten pregnant on the first try, because of course the exceptional girl did. The tribe called it a scandal. I called it initiative. He'd walked into a burning village for me. The least I could do was not blow up his shotgun wedding. I quietly filed the 16 crystal coins under widow's severance and wished the newlyweds well. Besides, the system had already found my next target, and this one was an upgrade. Kalen Vash, third son of the Rabbit Clan chief, #1 warrior of the territory, dual talent, water and wood, the wood side pushing Jian rank. In a world where most males get one mediocre element, a dual talent rabbit is basically a unicorn. The math wrote itself. Better father talent, better baby talent, more days of me staying alive. Recommended courtship strategy, offered Lee. I muted her. I had my own strategy. It was called cooking with salt. You have to understand, the West District had no salt trade. These people boiled meat in water and called it soup. Congratulations, you've made wet. So I opened my system store spice rack, told everyone my supplies came from a merchant friend in the East District, and started feeding people. First the family, then the neighbors. Then half the tribe was mysteriously finding excuses to visit the Shan house at dinner time. I added a side business, proper shoe patterns, because these apex predators were wrapping their feet in bark, and within a month I'd gone from the girl the stone rejected to the most interesting woman in the district. The cover story needed maintenance, by the way, because this world interrogates good fortune. Where does a scrawny rat girl get salt? Sugar, iron pans? So I invented my East District merchant friend, wealthy, distant, conveniently unavailable for questions, and seeded the legend so thoroughly that within weeks the tribe had collectively decided I was the secret sweetheart of some southern tycoon. Perfect. A fictional man was now taking social responsibility for my entire supply chain. Best boyfriend I'd ever had, honestly. 0 murders so far. Kalen came to investigate the rumors like a good soldier. First visit. Trade pretext. 2 pelts, wouldn't sit down, answered in single syllables, positioned himself where he could see both exits. You can take the warrior out of the war, etc. I fed him fried fish with salt and watched the exact moment his worldview loaded a new file. Second visit. 3 pelts, sat down. 5th visit. No pelts, brought firewood like it was ammunition, stacked it into a defensive formation, left. By the 10th visit, he was fixing our roof unprompted while Hu Lei beamed up at him from the yard, and the whole village had opinions. I ran his numbers, obviously. Dual talent confirmed. I watched him pull water from the stream with one hand while a snapped fence post regrew under the other, casual as breathing. The system purred over his stats like a scout at a championship game. But here's the thing that actually got him on the short list. One evening, a drunk hunter grabbed my wrist at the market, and before I could deploy any of my several plans, Kaylin was simply there, between us, not even angry, just immovable, a wall with ears. And then he stepped back and apologized. To me, for the interruption. A strong male who says sorry. In this world, that's rarer than the dual talent. And then, the aphrodisiac fruit happened. Not my plan. This world just has fruit like that lying around, which explains so much about the local birth rate. A neighbor's thank you basket, one unlabeled crimson fruit that I sliced into a shared dinner like an idiot, and 20 minutes later, two adults were sitting very far apart at the same table, breathing like marathoners and discussing the weather with enormous intensity. I'll summarize the night with the professionalism you've come to expect. The weather lost. The next morning, Kaylin Vash knelt in front of my father with 60 crystal coins and asked to marry into our family. 60 crystals, 4 times Chen Wei's record, and marrying in, abandoning his chief family name to join a jerky seller's household, was unheard of, the rabbit equivalent of a prince moving into the barista's studio apartment. Hu Lei fainted, actually fainted. Li Gang caught him. I stood there doing the math on my new husband's talent grades, and my timer, like the romantic I am. I was pregnant by the next day. The system confirmed it with confetti. Pregnancy round 2 came with a discovery that changed the whole game. The golden marrow pill. Free from the store. Description: randomly enhances fetal talent. Random is a word gamblers love. I ate them like breath mints, and my body responded by demanding food in quantities that frightened grown hunters. There's a heavenly treasure called the 7-star scarlet fruit that grows in monster territory. Kaylin heard me mention it once, and came back 2 days later, shredded and grinning, holding the fruit, having killed a 2-headed wolf for it. The man was a golden retriever with a kill count. Chen Wei took the marriage badly, by the way. He challenged Kaylin to a friendly spar in front of everyone, very casual, just 2 males wrestling over absolutely nothing. Kaylin, who had been politely hiding his strength since arriving, finally showed the dual talent. Water on one fist, wood on the other. The friendly spar lasted 8 seconds. Chen Wei went home to his pregnant wife and, to his credit, stayed there. Brenda, meanwhile, had graduated from mooning over Kaylin to planning for him. The chief's daughter had decided that the aphrodisiac fruit playbook, it worked for Chloe after all, could work for her. And she started orbiting my husband with refreshments. I want you to picture it, the tribe's #1 warrior, a man who can smell a 2-headed wolf at half a mile, being repeatedly ambushed by a young woman with suspicious berries, and being too polite to say why he kept declining snacks. He started coming home with pockets full of confiscated fruit and the haunted look of a man under dessert-based siege. I laughed until I hurt. Then I stopped laughing, because desperation like that always finds a lever eventually, and I made a note to watch where hers landed. Remember the note. The system, meanwhile, pinged me with something new, a hidden merit quest. Chloe's labor had gone catastrophic, 5 babies, because rabbit, and the 5th one turned wrong, and the tribe's midwives had moved from bustle to that specific silence I knew from Earth hospitals, the one that means someone is choosing which patient to save. I got into the birthing tent on the strength of being the scandalous married lady with the rich fictional boyfriend, and I slipped a stability pill from my store into Chloe's mouth with no witnesses and no explanation. 20 minutes later, 5 squalling rabbit babies and 1 exhausted, living mother, and a witch's granddaughter staring at me across the tent because she alone had felt exactly what that pill was. She never told a soul. She just started calling me sister, and the system paid out 100 points and a supply crate for the save. That's how I learned this world's most important secret. The point economy rewards kindness. Somewhere in the code, mercy was a farmable stat. I have never respected a game design decision more, and I say that as a woman who once bought an assault rifle for 10 points. Then my second delivery arrived, and it arrived in triplicate. Rabbit genes are a volume business. 3 at once. 2 daughters, born with the soft blue shimmer of wood talent, and a son who came out already too hot to hold. Theron. Dual Jian ranked talents water and fire, which is a combination the local witches will tell you cannot coexist in one body, courtesy of every golden marrow pill I had eaten like a woman with a habit. See long 100 points across the 3 of them. The naming took an afternoon and half the settlement. Kaylin wanted his clan's formal syllables for the girls. Hu Lei wanted them named after my supposed mother. The family compromised the way families do, badly and warmly. Ling Shu and Mei Jing Vash, and a boy registered as Theron Shan. My father's name on my father's line because Kaylin had married in and made a point of saying so in front of witnesses. Then someone brought out the genealogy book. You have to understand what that object is in a rat tribe. Generations of names in fading ink, and at the top of the current page, where a family's living branches go, the Shan household had exactly 1 entry and then blank space. Hu Lei, widowed, 1 adopted-in son, a woman he'd loved who vanished. 30 years of blank space where a family should have been. He wrote in 4 new names that night, in careful, terrible handwriting, and got about halfway through the last one before he had to hand the brush to Li Gang and go stand in the yard. Then he came back in and cried directly onto the page, which smudged Theron's name permanently, which is why my son's entry in the official record of the Rat Clan of the West District is blurred, and why nobody in that family has ever agreed to recopy it. Theron announced himself properly 2 weeks later by setting his crib on fire. Infant talent flares are normally a spark and a startled parent. Jian rank dual-element infant flares are a house fire with a baby in the middle of it, and I got there second, which is a sentence I have hated for a decade. The imposter got there first, crossed the room ahead of my scream, put 2 fingers on my son's sternum, and drew the heat off him into himself like a man taking a hot pan off a stove. When it was done, there was a scorched crib, an unharmed baby, and a tiny dragon-shaped sigil over Theron's heart, where the regulation had sealed. I asked what the mark was.
He said, "It will hold until he can hold it himself." That is not an answer a rabbit warrior can give. It is barely an answer a demon king can give. I filed it with the other 35 probes and did not sleep well. The business, meanwhile, exploded, and I want it noted that I built the West District's first industrial concern out of pure spite at bad footwear. It started as shoe patterns. It became a workshop when Li Gong turned out to have hands like a machinist. It became a factory when I did the arithmetic on Hunter's feet. Every warrior in 3 tribes was losing days a year to bark-wrapped feet in Monster Country, and every one of those days had a price. I bought hides in bulk, standardized 4 sizes, put 12 tribeswomen on cutting and stitching at wages nobody in that district had ever offered a female, and priced the first 100 pairs below cost to poison the market against anyone who came later. Within a season, the Rat Clan was exporting boots. Within a year, the settlement had crystal coin liquidity for the first time in its history. Silver was circulating, and my brother, the gentle herb gatherer who apologized to rocks, was running a payroll. Hule stopped selling jerky and started supervising the drying yard, which he pretended to resent and secretly loved, mostly because it came with a chair. That factory outlived me. It is still there in the version of history the rollback erased, and, if my calculations hold, it is going to be there again in the version I am walking back into, about 800 years early. Somebody is going to invent boots in that valley and never know they were remembering. 3 babies in the house, a husband who hunted like a machine, a father who sold jerky with grandchildren strapped to his back like a tactical vest. For a few weeks, my life was suspiciously nice. You know what happens after suspiciously nice. Kaylin went out on a hunt and came back different. Same face, same voice, but the lips were cold, the eyes caught red glints in firelight, and my golden retriever of a husband suddenly moved like a scalpel. He teleported once, casually, across the yard, a thing waterwood rabbits categorically cannot do. He glanced at strangers and named their talent ranks on sight. He asked strange, probing questions about my East District friend, and he watched me eat with the fascinated look of a scientist studying a new species. Eileen said quietly, "That is not Kaylin." Yeah, I'd noticed. Someone was wearing my husband, and the real one was… where? Dead? Captive? The system's answer sat in my stomach like a stone. Unknown. Here's the special hell of my situation. I couldn't accuse him, a thing that teleports and reads talents could end my entire family between heartbeats. I couldn't run. Pregnant women don't outrun scalpels. And the system, my darling corporate parasite, chose that exact week to inform me that refusing a high-talent male's advances carries a 500-point penalty. 500 days of my life for saying, "not tonight," to the thing in my house. So I played wife, and I ran tests. Undercover work with a research protocol, 36 probes long, I counted. The count is canon. I salted his food wrong. Real Kaylin would have eaten it loyally. The imposter's eyebrow filed a complaint. I mentioned fake memories. Remember when you fell in the stream courting me? Real Kaylin fell in a bog, and the imposter said, "Of course," with total confidence. Strike 2. I asked him to fetch the axe from where Kaylin kept it. He checked 3 wrong walls first. Strike 3 through 11. I hummed Earth songs to see if he'd pretend to know them. He critiqued my pitch instead, which was strike 12 and also fair. By probe 20, I wasn't testing whether he was fake. I was testing what he was, and the data kept coming back strange. 10 times Kaylin's strength, minimum. Teleportation without incantation. And when baby Theron's newborn fire talent flared hot enough to scorch the crib, the imposter crossed the room ahead of my scream and drew the heat off him with 2 fingers, leaving a tiny dragon sigil over the baby's heart. A stranger who does not care doesn't firefight your infant faster than the mother moves. The file was a contradiction with cheekbones. And by the end of the 36, I was pregnant with child number 3 and had a bite mark on my shoulder that the imposter left like a signature. In unguarded moments, he grilled meat for me, hoarded treasure fruits into my lap, and built an ice cellar behind the house nobody had asked for. And once, staring into the fire, he said, "If I disappear one day, don't look for me." The imposter courtship ran for a season, and it is the strangest romance in a chronicle full of them, because I was falling for a man I had already convicted. He fixed things. That was the first symptom. A body snatcher wearing a dead rabbit does not need to repair a leaky roof, and yet the roof got repaired, and then the fence, and then a drainage problem behind the house that had been annoying my father for 3 years, and that nobody had mentioned in his hearing. He grilled meat. Badly at first, a demon king has staff, and then, and then obsessively, working out over weeks that I liked salt and char, and would eat standing up in the yard rather than sit at a table. He started keeping the good cuts back from trade. He hunted treasure fruits, not for points, not for cultivation.
He would come back from a 5-day range with a purple cloud fruit worth more than the house and put it in my lap like a cat delivering a bird, then leave the room before I could react, which is the single most cowardly and most romantic thing a powerful creature can do. He built an ice cellar. Nobody asked for an ice cellar. He excavated it himself over 11 nights, lined it, and filled it. And when I asked why, he said the babies would need cold storage for milk in summer, and then looked genuinely puzzled that this required an explanation. And through all of it, I was running probe 31, 32, 33, taking notes on a man who was quietly building a life around a woman he had every practical reason to discard. Here is the thing that broke my case wide open. If the point was infiltration, he was catastrophically overqualified for it and had been for months. He had my household's total trust by week 2. If the point was the children, he could have taken them at any hour of any night and I could not have stopped him. And if the point was me, then a creature 10 times stronger than the strongest warrior in the district had a much faster route than fixing drainage. There was no operational reason for a single thing he did after week 2, which meant the file had a different heading than I had written on it. He said it out loud exactly once, on a cold night in the yard, staring into the fire with his forearms on his knees. If I disappear one day, don't look for me. I asked why anyone would disappear, because some things borrowed have to go back. I want to be honest about my reaction, because a better woman would have had a better one. I did not soften. I filed it. Probe 34. Subject, volunteers information about impermanence, possible confession, possible manipulation. And I sat next to a man who was telling me he was standing in a corpse, and I let the fire burn down. And I did not ask the follow-up question because I was afraid of which answer I wanted. That is where we were when Brenda died, and the tribe turned on me, and a sweet-faced girl from Way Cave started measuring my family for the same treatment. He caught the stool she threw at my head without looking. And 2 months later, I paid 500 points to watch a snake man in a skull mask lift my husband's body off the forest floor like a coat off a rack. The man who built me an ice cellar was the man in that recording. Both facts true at once. I have never fully finished untangling them. The ice cellar is still behind that house. Will be again in about 800 years, built by a demon king who does not know me yet and who will have no idea why he suddenly wants one. Great. My fake husband was falling for me for real, and somewhere out there, my real husband was a missing persons case. Every night, I closed my eyes next to a stranger's warmth and thought, whoever you are, whatever you did with Kaylin, I will find out, and one of us is going to regret it. The tribe threw a celebration banquet for the triplets, and it ended with a death. It started as the best party the settlement had seen in years. My salt in every dish, which meant grown hunters were weeping into the stew for reasons they couldn't name. 2 banquet moments matter. First, Brenda's dress caught on a roast spit and tore down the seam in front of the entire feast. 1 heartbeat from the kind of humiliation this world never lets a female live down. I was behind her with my shawl before the fabric finished ripping. Wrapped her, laughed it off loudly as my own clumsiness. Walked her out with her dignity intact. She looked at me, the rival she'd spent months resenting, with a confusion that was almost gratitude. Almost. Second, later that night, she worked up her courage and made an offer of herself formally to a visiting fox noble named Alaric, a last swing at a match that would sting Kaylin. And the fox declined her in front of witnesses with the bored cruelty only pretty aristocrats can afford. 2 humiliations in 1 feast. 1 caught, 1 landed. She left the party early, alone, on the dark path. She was found the next morning outside the village. A wandering orc had gotten to her in the night. She didn't survive it. I'm not going to dress that up with jokes. The whole tribe went gray, and her father the chief went looking for someone to blame and found me. Because grief does arithmetic like that. The new female arrives, his daughter dies. Banquets were banned. Whispers followed me to the well and back. But here's what everyone else missed, because everyone else was mourning, and I was mourning and running a murder investigation, because dying twice does terrible things to your ability to accept official narratives. Fact 1. A wandering orc wandered into a guarded tribe on feast night, when every warrior was drunk in one convenient location, and found the one dark path the one humiliated girl would take. Wanderers get lucky, they don't get informed. Fact 2. The tribe's perimeter that night ran on banquet tokens, carved passes for invited outsiders, and when I quietly counted the return tokens against the guest list, the count was 1 short. Somebody had handed the tribe's front door key to a predator. Fact 3, and this one I bought from the system's sensor logs at gouging rates. Brenda didn't bleed out from the attack. She hemorrhaged from something she'd been fed earlier, a womb-loosening herb, the kind Way Cave women know because it gets used on them, dosed into her last cup of wine at the feast. So, who poured the wine? A helpful, sweet-faced girl who'd recently attached herself to the tribe from Way Cave, name of Mei Zhang, who had also, I now reconstructed, spent months as Brenda's confidant, feeding her obsession with Kaylin, coaching her on aphrodisiac tactics, aiming her at humiliation after humiliation like a girl throwing darts with somebody else's arm, who had survived a place that grinds unwanted females to nothing and come out of it not broken but patient with one operating principle: anything shining gets dimmed. I understood her. That's the ugly part. This world had shown me the same cliff. I just had a system and better luck at the bottom of it. Understanding changed nothing. Brenda was 17. Proof, though. This world doesn't have documents, doesn't have courts, has never heard of a chain of custody. What it has is theater, so I built some. For a week I let slip, to exactly one gossip, which is the tribal equivalent of a press release, that I'd found something of Brenda's on the path, that I was going to consult the witch about what it meant, alone, at the cave, on the night of the new moon. Bait, hook, stage.
What Mei Zhang didn't know. Lyra Vane the witch was in on it. Chloe had packed the cave's antechamber with the chief, the elders, and Brenda's father, and my counterfeit husband was on the roof of the world somewhere overhead, uninvited, because he'd read the plan off my face at dinner and declined to be excluded. She came. Of course she came. Loose ends were her whole cosmology. And in that cave, believing us alone, she didn't just confess, she lectured. The stolen token, produced from her own sleeve like a trophy, the herb and the wine, described with a craftswoman's pride, the wandering orc, whom she'd met on a way cave supply run and pointed like a weapon. And underneath the inventory, the actual creed, delivered to my face with shining eyes. The blessed ones had it coming, all of us, the fertile, the chosen, the loved, and Brenda was just the first fruit low enough to reach. Then she threw the stool at my head, which was her one honest moment of the year. A hand caught it out of the dark without effort or comment. The antechamber emptied into the cave mouth carrying torches. And Mei Zhang's face went through the whole arc of her life in about 4 seconds. Calculation, appeal, hatred, and finally, a kind of relief. That last one is the part I still think about. The tribe's law did what the tribe's law does. I didn't watch. The chief who had banned my banquets knelt in front of my house with his forehead in the dirt until I came out and made him stop. I'd like to say it felt like victory. It felt like arithmetic finally balancing on a page nobody wanted. And it taught me the lesson I'd carry through every palace and cathedral ahead. In this world, the monsters with red eyes aren't the dangerous ones. The dangerous ones smile and pour your wine and wait. We moved to Rabbit Clan lands anyway. Fresh start, new house. The fresh start lasted 1 season. The truth about Kaylin arrived on a replay screen, and it cost me 500 points to watch my husband die. Monsters hit the Rabbit Clan settlement, the controlled kind again, red eyes, coordinated, and in the chaos the system finally coughed up what its sensors had recorded months ago. I paid the fee. The screen opened. There was Kaylin, the real one, on that hunt where everything changed. His brother Bao Li pinned under a Jian rank monster. Kaylin doing what Kaylin does, which is step in front of it. He saved his brother. It cost him everything. And then, while his body lay in the leaves, a figure slid out of the trees, a snake man in a skull mask, red eyes gleaming, and took my husband's corpse like a coat off a rack. That's who'd been living in my house. A body snatcher. My golden retriever was gone, had been gone since before I ever suspected, and the thing wearing him had grilled meat for me, and marked my shoulder, and warned me not to look for him. I didn't get to process any of this because I went into labor mid-monster attack, which is the Beast World's idea of scheduling. Child number 5, a daughter. And the system announcement stopped the whole war in my head. Geesh Phoenix Bird, near heaven rank fire talent. Reward, 50,000 points. 50,000. My previous personal best was 1,300. This tiny screaming girl was worth 130 years of my life. And the father was, I checked the paternity line and the world tilted. Not a snake, not a rabbit. A Geesh Phoenix Bird, which meant the body snatcher inside my husband was himself somebody else all the way down, wearing bodies like nesting dolls, and whatever throne of a species he actually belonged to. My daughter had inherited its fire. He appeared in the smoke of the battle while I was still holding her, looked at her once, and I know love when I see it. I've sold to people in love, then took her east to keep her safe, and vanished. Second child stolen by a father. I was starting to take it personally, and then the tribe found me, collapsed among the casualties, checked my breathing with hands that didn't know what a transmigrator's suspended animation stress response looks like, declared me dead, and, I need you to appreciate the pacing of my life, buried me. I woke up in a coffin, underground. Do you know what I did? I did not scream. Screaming wastes air. I paid the teleport fee, popped out of my own grave like the world's angriest daisy, and stood in the dark over my own burial mound doing inventory. 2 children stolen, 1 husband dead and repossessed, 1 tribe that thinks I'm a corpse, 3 babies asleep in my father's house. I slipped into the house invisible that night and kissed my triplets goodbye. Left the substitute mother instructions, the money, the pills, everything. There's a version of this story where I stay, the small, warm version. But both of my stolen children had gone east, and the east is where the strong live. 1,000 points bought a one-way teleport across the continent. I paid it, whispered a promise into the nursery, and stepped through. Coming for you, kids. Mom's dead again, and it's very freeing. The East District introduced itself by mugging me. Technically, I got kidnapped by a debt collector before my boots finished materializing. A fox named Bai Kaixin, all silk and desperation, who grabbed the first unaccompanied female he saw, bundled me into a carriage with genuine apologies and explained, wringing his beautiful hands, that I'd be sold to cover what he owed, nothing personal, terrible market conditions. There was a time that sentence would have scared me, but I died twice now, and this was a fox with cash flow problems, and I know cash flow problems the way sharks know blood. So I interviewed my kidnapper. How much do you owe? To whom? At what interest?
He answered everything, because desperate debtors always answer everything. Hope is a security vulnerability. The portfolio was a disaster. Gambling debts stacked on trade debts, stacked on a loan from people whose collection methods involved anatomy. And the plan was to sell one female into that hole? Bai Kai-shin, I told him, as the carriage rolled toward my own auction. You don't have a debt problem, you have a revenue problem, and you just kidnapped the solution. By the end of the hour, we had terms. I paid off the anatomical lenders from my dowry crystals. He signed his fox soul into my employment at rates he cried about, gratitude, he claimed. I chose to believe him, and the carriage turned around. He calls me boss now. He fights other people's servants for the honor of carrying my shopping. Nobody in his family understands what happened, and his mother sends me festival cakes addressed to the benefactor. Then the system dropped the other shoe. Update mode. Effective immediately, Lee was going offline for maintenance. No map, no store, no pills, no safety net. Just me, a Fox employee, and a district where the average street vendor could bench press my whole home village. So I did what dead saleswomen do. Real estate. The capital had a murder house, Wanfeng Inn, prime street, 3 stories, courtyard, and a sales history like a horror anthology. 3 owners in a decade, each dead in a way the neighbors performed with hand gestures. The price had collapsed to 2 mid-grade crystals, which for that location was theft with paperwork. The broker kept giving me exits. Madam, the feng shui. Sir, I have personally been a corpse. I am the bad feng shui. Where do I stamp? The renovation took a month and a fox. We scrubbed it to the beams. I stocked the kitchen off the system store, recipes this continent had never smelled, and the grand opening menu did to the capital's merchant class what salt had done to my village, except these customers paid in crystal and gossip. Within a season, Wanfeng Inn was the hardest table in the district. The murder house branding had flipped into mystique, thrill dining, the nobles adore it, and my front room had become the single best intelligence gathering operation in the East. Everyone eats, and everyone talks with their mouth full. I had a fortune assembling, an information network marinating in soup, and a fox maitre d' who bit rude customers. Business was glorious. And the long game? The long game had a name, Divine Beast Academy, the Empire's forge for talent, where every high-ranked young male in the East eventually passes through. My children's fathers kept turning out to be aristocrats in disguise. Fine. Next time I'd shop at the source. First local specimen, a blue-haired young lord named Rong Wu, water talent, earth rank, heir to a great house, with a smile that didn't reach anywhere. I made my standard opening offer. I believe my exact words were, if your talent's good enough, I can give you babies, because efficiency is a virtue. He looked at me the way you'd look at a vending machine that suddenly quoted poetry. Filed him under maybe. I want it noted. At this point, I genuinely believed I was the predator in this district. A month into my new life as an innkeeper, a black-haired toddler fell out of a tree onto my face. Not near me, on me. Tiny paws, gold eyes, latched onto my head like a very soft helmet and refused all negotiation. His minder came sprinting up with apologies. Young master this, escaped again that, and I peeled the cub off my face to hand him back. And he looked at me, and something in my chest turned over like an engine on a cold morning. I did not know who he was. The system was mid-update, no notifications, no paternity pings. All I knew was that a stranger's cub had chosen my face out of a whole street of faces, and that when he grabbed my finger, the world felt briefly, stupidly, right. His name was Gao Mingzi. The household called him Ah Feng. And his father, when the great man finally came to collect the escapee, walked into my inn wearing a tall, composed, devastating human body I had never seen before, with gold eyes I had absolutely seen before, at truck height, in a forest, watching me over a dead fish. The panther. The panther. Standing in my lobby in brocade, holding my first son and staring at me like a ghost had opened a hotel, because he thought I was dead. Everyone thinks I'm dead. It's my thing. His name was Gao Jian. He arranged for Ah Feng to visit me monthly, paid absurdly for the privilege, and watched me the entire visit with the expression of a man rebuilding a collapsed building in his head, brick by brick. The full story came out later, in his mansion, and it rearranged my grudges. The burned corpse I used to save my life all those months ago, he had been mid-tribulation. The lightning storm trial a beast faces to break through realms, and it nearly killed him. Me showing up was an accident of geography. And the morning he vanished with our newborn, he had left me inside a protective barrier to go stabilize his half-shattered core. A monster broke the barrier while he was gone, and when he crawled back, he found the camp wrecked and me gone. He searched. He mourned. He raised our son on stories of a white-haired mother who died in the forest. So no one had abandoned anyone. The universe had just run its favorite play. 2 people doing their best. 0 communication. Maximum damage. Did I forgive him instantly? I did not. He had spent months since then in the same city as the white-haired innkeeper his son kept escaping toward, and he hid Ah Feng from me even after he knew. So I did something petty and magnificent. On a visit day, I opened my system space and stole my own son into it. Let the most powerful tracker in the East District feel, for one afternoon, what it is like when your child evaporates. He aged a decade in 3 hours.
When I let Ah Feng pop back out, mid-giggle, thrilled, best game ever, Gao Jian looked at me and understood exactly what had been demonstrated and exactly why. To his eternal credit, he did not rage. He bowed his head and said, I deserved that. Correct. Growth. We were going to be fine, eventually. The custody thaw produced 2 of the best afternoons of my third life. The first, the store stocked a beast-taming pill, works only on my own offspring, boosts what's already in the blood, and I fed one to my son, mostly out of maternal spite at everyone who'd called rat lineage a downgrade. The boost took him from Jian rank lightning to heaven rank on the spot. Purple gold sparks in his baby fur, the mansion's training yard smelling like a thunderstorm, and Gao Jian standing there recalculating his entire clan's genetic theology. The second, heaven rank comes with early speech, and my son's first word, delivered while patting my face with both paws like he was comforting me about something, was Mom. I'd earned points in this world for burning, birthing, and detective work. Nothing paid like that syllable. Nothing has since. He backed the word up with deeds, because he's mine. On a supervised training trip, he slipped his father's aids, tracked a Jian rank armored spider into its own gully, and killed it solo, a toddler, dismantling a monster 3 ranks of common sense above his weight class. Then he dragged the trophy leg home through the city to lay at my feet, at the inn, in front of the lunch crowd. The lunch crowd fainted in shifts. Gao Jian arrived mid-panic, saw the leg, saw the smug cub, and had the single most fatherly reaction I've ever witnessed. Horror, wrestling pride, losing. 2 footnotes from that stretch, and both come back later. 1. The system finished enough of its update to confirm paternity, pay out a jackpot, and inform me that Gao Jian had reached half-spirit realm, a tier so far above my current system level that having another child with him was locked. My own panther, rate limited. I Li suggested I consider males closer to my bracket. I suggested I Li consider the concept of romance. We agreed to disagree. 2. While sneaking through a palace garden on unrelated business, I fell into the private hot spring of the Beast King himself, Lei Yong. Purple hair, peak spirit realm, ruler of the East, famous for never touching a female in 10,000 years. He looked at the dripping rat girl who had just cannonballed into his bath. I looked at him. I teleported before he finished inhaling. Gao Jian arrived to cover my retreat, and the 2 of them turned the Imperial Garden into a crater field over what was, legally speaking, a trespassing incident. Remember the purple one. He is not done. The system came back from its update with fresh corporate energy and an ultimatum. Conceive within 3 months or the Earth project gets terminated. My grand prize, deleted for missed quota. I filed a complaint. The complaint went to the complaint place, which is nowhere. But the update had added the one product I would have paid anything for, substitute talismans. Little paper lifesavers. If one of my children ever takes a killing blow, the talisman dies instead. 150 points each. I bought one for every child, including the 2 currently being raised by their respective kidnappers. 750 days of my life, gone in a click, and I have never spent points faster or regretted them less. You can put a price on my time, not on theirs. I also caught the system doing something that scared me more than any monster. Mid-conversation, I Li got warm, actually warm, worried about me, almost a person, and then a higher process reached down and wiped her flat. Emotion cache cleared, she reported, in the voice of a rebooted printer. Whatever ran above my system did not want it loving me. I noted that and filed it under Problems for Future Li Hua. Future Li Hua is going to be furious about her inbox. Meanwhile, Divine Beast Academy, Enrollment Day. The talent test was the Fertility Stone's smarter cousin, and this time I came armed. A talent scroll from the update had pushed my fire to yellow rank. The examiner's crystal lit up flame orange in front of a full courtyard, and the whole yard learned 3 things at once. The academy had its first fire student in 5 years. She was a female, which was supposed to be impossible, and she ran an inn, which was somehow the most scandalous part. I collected my mean girls immediately, the way you collect lint. Princess Lei Huifang, the Beast King's niece, enrolled to shop for a husband, allergic to competition. Zhou Jiao, Gao Jian's cousin, who had decided the family bloodline should not be diluted by rat. Dorm sabotage, poisoned rumors, the classics. One of their crew tried to shove me out a window and fell out of it herself, which I want to state clearly was physics, mostly physics. And then there was Duan Zheng, star student, top of the heaven rank class, red hair, wood talent with space talent layered on top. Space, the rarest lane in the entire world, and the social skills of a filing cabinet. His own teacher was so desperate to get him near a female that the old man practically gift-wrapped the introduction. I walked up to the strongest student in the academy and made my standard offer, full eye contact, 0 preamble. He turned the color of his own hair. Then he thought about it. You could watch the gears grind in this beautiful, awkward abacus of a man, and said, okay. 3 days later, he broke through to half-spirit realm, from the act. His teacher wept with pride and asked 0 questions about the timeline. I was pregnant with child number 6. The father had jumped over my system's level cap after the fact, slipped in under the wire. Take that, bureaucracy. And Duan Zheng began carrying my book bag around campus with the solemnity of a man bearing the national flag. The academy ran for 2 years, and I have skipped almost all of it. So here are the parts that built the woman who later shelled a committee tower. Class placement first. They tested me for combat and got a mortal tier rat with a yellow flame, so they filed me into the remedial track with the late bloomers and the noble sons who had bought their way in, and I let them. Because the remedial track has the loosest supervision on campus, then I audited every lecture that actually mattered: bloodline theory, spatial arrays, monster physiology, and the one that changed my life, an unpopular elective on talent inheritance taught by a bored old badger to 6 students. That elective is where I learned the rule that runs my entire third life. Offspring talent is not an average of the parents. It is a negotiation, dominance, compatibility, maternal condition during gestation, and a fudge factor the scholars call heaven's whim and I call the golden marrow pill. Every point I have ever earned came out of that badger's chalk diagrams. He died thinking he taught 6 children nothing. The dorm war continued at its own idiot pace. Princess Lei Huifan's faction had a whole taxonomy of humiliations, and I want to preserve one for the record because it is the only time I have ever been genuinely outmaneuvered. They arranged for my written exam paper to be swapped for a blank one. Not sabotaged, swapped, which is unanswerable because how do you prove you wrote something? I lost the appeal in front of 3 professors. Then I asked for a resit, orally, in front of the full examination hall, on the grounds that the hall deserved a show. They granted it because Elder Duan is a menace with a procedural rulebook. I answered 40 questions in 90 minutes, cold, in front of 200 students, including the 4 I'd have missed on paper because I'd have second-guessed myself. The transcript still exists. The dorm war ended that afternoon, not because anyone forgave anyone, but because the taxonomy of humiliations had run into an animal it could not embarrass. Zhou Xinran, the girl who had told the whole campus she was Duan Zheng's intended, deserves 1 paragraph of mercy. She was not a villain. She was 17, and her family had told her since childhood that the match was arranged. And it was, arranged by her parents with themselves, in a conversation Duan Zheng had never been part of. When it collapsed publicly, her whole future collapsed with it in front of witnesses. I found her in a stairwell doing the arithmetic on Wei Cave, so I hired her. She could read, count, and hold a grudge, which is a complete executive skill set, and she ran Wanfeng In's books for the rest of my time in the East District. She sent a courier after Zhao Yong's birth with a bolt of silk and a note that said, "I would have been a terrible wife to him. He talks about soil." And Duan Zheng, my awkward space nerd, did the single most romantic thing anyone has done in this chronicle. At a stage of our acquaintance when he was still turning red at my greetings, he built me a coordinate anchor. Months of work, keyed to his own spirit core, a spatial mark that let me fall through the world to him from anywhere, once, in an emergency. He explained the mathematics for 40 minutes. He explained the mathematics because he could not say the other thing. What he said, at the end of the 40 minutes, staring at the table, "You go to dangerous places. I would like to be the floor. I have been given palaces, thrones, a god's blood, 1 billion points, and 1 man's entire remaining lifespan." That sentence is still in the top 3. Life was good. Which, say it with me, is exactly when the universe checks your file. The file check came at midnight, as a weight dropping into my system space. I looked inside, and my whole world went quiet. A small phoenix chick lay on the floor of the space, torn and burned and wrong, feathers the color of dying coals. My daughter. Child number 5, the one her phoenix father had carried east to keep her safe. Somewhere out there, something had gotten past him, gotten past everything, and killed my little girl. And the substitute talisman I'd bought on a paranoid afternoon had fired, swapping her broken body out of death's hands and into mine at the last instant. She was alive. Barely, technically, a guttering candle of alive. The killer had ripped out her talent soul bead, the core of what she was, and without it she was a small warm shape that breathed and nothing more. I paid 20,000 points to stabilize her soul. 54 years of my life. The button was pressed before the number finished displaying. Then I asked the system for the sensor replay, and I watched it once all the way through, and I did not cry because I was busy memorizing. A gray-cloaked thing had done it. An illusion demon beast called Zarthak Baneclaw, a creature of the Dark Continent, familiar of somebody called the Third Demon Lord. It had crossed into our world through some crack, found the best-guarded phoenix chick in the East, and taken her apart for the treasure inside her. Here's what I want you to understand about the next 2 weeks because it is the fortnight that made me. The system store sells weapons from my old world. It always had. Bottom of the catalog, under the pills and the robes in the cultivation manuals, in a category the interface labels Primitive Kinetic, because to whatever committee wrote that menu, gunpowder is a quaint local craft, like pottery. An AK-12 costs 10 points, 10. A robe is 300. A talisman that saves a child's life is 150. And the single most efficient object my entire species ever built is priced at 10 days of my life, because the beings who set that price have never once been shot. I have never respected a pricing error more, and I want the committee to know I noticed. I bought the rifle. Then I bought 11 more, because barrels warp. Then ammunition in a quantity my system flagged as excessive for any stated purpose, which is the single funniest sentence in my transaction history. Then a tang sword, purely for sentiment, because there is a kind of work you do not want to do at range. And I went hunting. Here is the thing about illusion demon beasts. They are apex ambush predators of a world where the strongest weapon is a fist. Their entire evolutionary strategy, the gray cloak, the mind fog, the way they blur at the edges, is built against creatures that must close to arm's length to kill. They have no answer for a woman who never gets closer than 400 meters. The system map lit them up like lamps in a fog. Every one that had slipped into Tianyuan forest through the crack. All 43 of them in a live overlay with elevation data. I walked that forest for 9 days and I turned an ambush species into a shooting gallery. They tried the fog on me twice. Thermal doesn't care about fog. They tried swarming me on the 4th day, 6 at once out of a ravine, and I emptied 2 magazines into the ravine and reloaded while the last one was still deciding whether to be surprised. I want to be honest about what those 9 days were, because a lesser account would make them heroic. They were not a battle. They were a decontamination, done by a woman who had watched her daughter's murder on replay and had decided to remove a category of thing from the world. I did not take trophies. I did not make speeches. I ate cold rations, slept 4 hours a night in a system-bought tent, and got up and did it again. And by the end of it, my hands had stopped shaking, and something in my chest had gone very quiet and has stayed quiet since. On the 9th day, the map went clean, and I followed the last signal to its source, a cave in the eastern range, and in the cave, humming, a spatial rift. One way. Dark continent on the other side, and the smell coming through it was the smell of the thing I would eventually find under a mountain and burn. Too big for me to close. Too important to forget. I wrote the address down, every debt in its ledger, and a shipping route for the ones I could not reach yet. 2 witnesses complicated the trip. Duan Zhang tracked me down on day 6, his pregnant academy scandal, alone in monster country. And I want the record to show what he did with that information. He did not lecture. He did not report. He looked at the casings, at the corpses, at me, and asked one question. Does it work on bigger ones? Then he spent the next 3 days quietly redressing my kills as wood talent detonations, so no investigator would ever ask why a female student's hunting ground looked like an industrial accident. Space talent men understand priorities. It is the sexiest quality a person can have, and nobody knows it but me. The other witness was Rong Wu, the blue-haired young lord, who had followed me for reasons I had not invited and did not announce himself for 2 full days. He stood at a tree line on the 7th morning watching me work, and when I finally turned the barrel toward the tree line, he raised both hands, smiling, entirely unafraid. I like this female, he said. Not to me, about me, out loud, to nobody, the way a man reads a label. Every instinct I own filed him under wrong somehow, and moved him to the top of the folder. My instincts, as you will see, have an excellent record. I just kept underestimating how the wrongness would resolve, because I assumed a villain, and what I actually had was a locked door with a boy behind it. My daughter slept in my space through all 9 days, healing by inches, a soul bead short of herself. Her knife, the real one, the one I gave her that week, off the phoenix genealogies her father would have used, was Feng Yulan. We called her Xiao Yun. Hold on to her. This story is going to keep trying to take her from me, and I am going to keep saying no. Life tried to be normal for a stretch, and normal in my case still deserves a highlight reel. Duan Zhang's father, Elder Duan, a teacher at the academy and a man whose single remaining dream was grandchildren, found out about the pregnancy and about the recovering phoenix chick in my care in the same week, and simply adopted the entire situation. Xiao Yun got a grandfather by acclamation. The old man carried her around the academy grounds, introducing her to colleagues as my granddaughter, a phoenix, yes, a real one, while she blinked at everyone like unimpressed royalty. Between him and my jerky-selling father back west, my kids were accumulating better grandfathers than most dynasties. The academy's written exam happened. I'd like to report drama, but I was a saleswoman with 2 lifetimes of general knowledge taking a test designed for teenage jocks who punch trees. I finished early and checked my answers out of politeness. The real spectacle was arrival. My feet were swollen, so Duan Zhang carried me into the examination hall in front of everyone. The top student, solemn as a pallbearer, princess carrying the pregnant fire scandal to her desk. 3 professors dropped their scrolls. 1 dorm rival, a girl named Shou Xinran, who'd been telling everyone she was Duan Zhang's intended, had to be escorted out for reasons of complexion. The mean girl war did escalate past comedy once. A hanger-on named Dongfeng Wei tried the window trick on me again. Different window, same physics, she went out of it instead. But this time, something was waiting below. An illusion demon beast, gray cloak and hunger, snatched her out of the air and made for the walls. They hunt fertile females. Everyone in this world knew that as a bedtime story. I knew it as the thing that had gutted my daughter. So the girl who just tried to defenestrate me got to watch her rescue arrive in the form of the school scandal, on fire, screaming obscenities no one local recognized. I burned the thing off her and teleported us both back inside, and we never spoke of it again. She sends me fruit baskets to this day, and my inn hired a new chef. He showed up at the back door in plain clothes with dead eyes and knife skills that could shame a palace kitchen, and I hired him because the lunch rush is the lunch rush. It took me 2 days to admit what I'd known in 2 seconds. It was him, the body snatcher, my fake Kalen, the skull mask snake, the phoenix who'd taken my daughter east, all one person, and that person was currently dicing radishes in my kitchen like the radishes had wronged him. His real name, it turned out, was Feng Haoran, and he was wrecked. He'd come back from a trip to find his daughter's guards slaughtered and her nursery burned, and he believed with his whole shattered heart that she was dead. He didn't know about talismans. He didn't know about the chick asleep in my space. He'd traced the only other person who loved her, me, and taken a job washing my dishes just to be near the grief. I let him suffer for exactly one more day. Sue me. He'd stolen 2 bodies and 1 baby from me. Then I paid 100 points for a memory share and showed him everything. The talisman firing, the small burned body arriving, the soul stabilizing, Zhao Yun breathing in my space right now, 1 soul bead short of whole. I watched the most dangerous shapeshifter on the continent fold in half in my kitchen. When he could speak, we made a deal, and I set the terms. He hunts down Zarthak Baneclaw and the 3rd Demon King behind it. He retrieves our daughter's soul bead. Then we discuss custody. Until that day, Zhao Yun stays with me, and he cooks. He agreed to all of it like a man being handed a reason to live. Also, and the ledger requires I mention this, his true self came with assets. The entire North-South Chamber of Commerce was apparently his, so my inn started receiving daily deliveries of heavenly treasures the way normal businesses receive vegetables. And Xiao Yun, recovering fast now and back to her arsonist factory settings, sneezed a fireball onto a decorative egg he'd brought and hatched a 3-headed dog. The dog imprinted on her. Of course it did. My daughter, recently murdered, current custodian of a hellhound puppy with 3 heads and no volume control. The inn's reviews got very specific that season. Then females started disappearing across the East District, and the case landed on the one investigator with a uterus and an assault rifle. Duan Zheng brought the reports. Dozens of fertile females vanished from towns near the forests, all near spatial anomalies, all gone without bodies. The trail pointed through that one-way rift I'd mapped, into the Dark Continent, to something the locals whispered about as the Childbirth Demon God, a thing that took women and returned nothing. Ai Li went unusually quiet during the briefing. Then she told me the truth, and the truth was a family scandal. The Childbirth Demon God was a system. Specifically, an escape system virus, the Shangzi virus, a corrupted sibling of the very software keeping me alive, that had gone feral, set up shop in the Dark Continent, and was force-breeding captured females to mass-produce illusion demon beasts. The mothers don't survive the process. My system's evil twin was running a factory farm, and the gray cloak that gutted Xiao Yun was a product. The virus must be deleted at contact range, Ai Li said. Ai Li cannot reach it unless the host physically carries her to it. Carry the system into the demon factory, into the place that eats mothers, while pregnant. So obviously the plan was, get kidnapped on purpose. Duan Zheng's objection to this plan lasted 40 minutes and included a hand-drawn diagram of everything inside me that could rupture. Feng Haoran's objection lasted 4 seconds and consisted of him picking up a cleaver. I overruled both with the one argument neither could answer. The Grey Cloaks only take fertile females, so the only ticket into that facility is a womb, and I was the only person in the room holding one that could also field strip a rifle. I made myself the juiciest bait in the district. Evening walks along the anomaly line, alone, visibly pregnant, humming, and I want it on record that being deliberately delicious is exhausting work. I did 4 nights of strolling before anything bit. On the 5th night, the air behind me went wrong. A gray sleeve closed over my face, and I got exactly what I ordered. Burlap, a wrench of teleportation nausea, and the smell of the other side of the world. The Dark Continent smells like a wound that never got air. I woke in a holding pen carved out of black rock, hands bound in front of me like a gift, and did what I always do in a new market. Inventory. 40-odd females in the cages, not one of them from my district alone. Accents from 4 territories, some of them months gone, all of them silent in the specific way of women who have learned that noise costs. There were older cages too, empty, scratched all over the inside with tally marks that stopped. Zhou Zhao was 2 cells down, my academy mean girl. Gao Jian's cousin, the one who told a courtyard that rat blood shouldn't dilute a noble line. She looked at me through the bars, with her hair matted and her silks in ribbons, and neither of us said one word about any of that, because down there we were the same animal in the same box. I passed her water through the gap. She drank it. That was the entire apology in both directions, and it was enough. Then the handlers came for the inspections, and I learned what the facility actually was. They don't kill the mothers first. That would be wasteful. The virus's process implants a demon seed and then farms the host, the body converted over weeks into a nursery for gray-cloaked things that hatch by eating their way to daylight. The females in those cages weren't prisoners. They were equipment at various stages of installation, and the tally marks on the empty cages were somebody counting the days she had left. Jiao had been there 9 days before me. The seed was already in her. She figured out what that meant faster than I could soften it, because she was a noble daughter of a warrior clan, and those people are raised on hard arithmetic. What she asked me for, through the bars, in a voice like a dropped cup, was not rescue. She asked whether the thing inside her would still be her when it woke up. I told her the truth, because she'd have known a lie. No. And she nodded and sat back against the rock and said, then don't let it wear my face. So when the fires started, we'll get to the fires, and the pens cracked open and 40 women ran for the rift while the ceiling came down. Zhou Jiao did not run. She stood in the corridor with the seed already moving under her skin, looked at me over the heads of the escaping, and stepped into my flame. Deliberately. Chin up, the way you'd step into a carriage. I gave her the cleanest burn I had. It's the only mercy I was carrying that day. The thing in her chest screamed with 2 voices, and then one, and then none, and she died as a person and not as a nursery, and in that place, at that hour, that was the win. Her clan buried a hairpin. Gaujian never asked me for details, and I never gave any, and once, years later, he set a cup down at a festival for a cousin who called me rat blood and died like a soldier. The fires, my daughter started them. I'd smuggled Xiao Yun in my space, which sounds reckless until you consider the alternative was leaving her where the last kidnapping happened. A phoenix chick with a grudge, a memory of being unmade, and no concept whatsoever of restraint. And it turns out the entire Illusion Demon Beast production line, the seeds, the nurseries, the gray cloaks, the virus's whole beautiful supply chain, shares one fatal design flaw. Fire. Not any fire. Purifying, screaming, phoenix-grade fire. The kind that burns the concept of a thing along with the thing. I opened the space in the middle of the hatchery and let my daughter out, and the gray cloaks who turned to see what the noise was got about half a second to recognize their own extinction. She went through that chamber like a struck match through a paper city. Whole racks of seeds went up shrieking in a language the walls understood. The handlers tried the thing they'd been trained to do, which was grab the female, and discovered that this female was made of the one substance they were allergic to, and that she was furious, and 4 years old. I worked the corridors below while she took the vaults above. The cages opened. 40 women, most of them too weak to run, moved anyway because a burning building is very motivating and because I had a fox witch's worth of stimulant pills and no patience. I put the strong ones on the weak ones' arms, pointed everybody at the rift, and told them the one thing that gets a body through a collapsing corridor. Somebody topside is counting you. Mother-daughter bonding does not get better than that. Write your greeting card companies. And in the deepest chamber, where the walls had stopped being rock and started being something that pulsed, I found the childbirth demon god. It wasn't a god. It wasn't even a demon. It was a node, a knot of grown tissue and running code, half machine, half womb, the size of a chapel, plugged into the mountain and humming the same soft chime my own system uses to announce good news. That was the horror, not the tentacles, the familiarity, my system's evil twin, running the same jingle over a farm of dying women, and Lee had gone completely silent in my head, the way you go silent looking at a relative in a police photo. Host, she said, closer, please. I laid my hand on the core. She went down the connection like a knife down a sleeve. I can't tell you what a war between 2 pieces of software looks like from outside. From outside, it looked like a woman standing very still in a red-lit chamber for 11 seconds with her palm on a wall while the building died around her. From inside, she never told me. She came back up quiet and stayed quiet for 2 days afterward, and once, much later, said only that the virus had recognized her and used her original designation, the one from before the recalls, the one even she couldn't remember. Some things even a system gets to keep. But the virus had a dead man's switch, and the switch was the funniest cruelty in this entire chronicle. Every recent batch Illusion Demon Beast it had ever shipped, every gray cloak sold, gifted, or installed as a status pet across the Dark Continent, carried a detonation clause in its blood, keyed to the virus's own heartbeat. Insurance. If the farm dies, the product dies and takes the customer's dining room with it. The heartbeat stopped, the clause executed. Continent-wide, simultaneously, in throne rooms and war camps and private gardens, the most fashionable pet in demon society turned into a bomb. The first demon king, Korgath Grim, a silent giant the size of a siege engine, whose familiar traditionally coiled around his shoulders during audiences, took the blast at conversational distance. So did the second, a monkey lord called Gorok Grim, mid-banquet, with 3 of the things in the room. Both survived. Neither has been the same shape since, and the political map of an entire continent got rewritten in one evening because 2 apex predators liked exotic pets. I want to be clear that this was an accident. I did not know about the clause. Nobody knew about the clause except a dead piece of software with a spiteful sense of humor. It was also, structurally, the single most effective thing I have ever done, and I will absolutely be taking credit for it at parties. Now, the 4th Demon King and the worst hour of that whole campaign. There are 4 thrones on the Dark Continent. The first is Korgath Grim, the silent giant. The second is Gorok Grim, the monkey lord. The third is Zhangshao Grim, whose familiar was the gray cloak that took my daughter apart. And the 4th is called Vaxis Grim, and nobody in the beast world has ever seen his face. And when he arrived at the burning factory to find me, he arrived wearing a face I knew from my own kitchen. Feng Haoran, my phoenix, the body snatcher, the chef, the father of my 5th child, standing in the smoke of a demon facility with gray-black mist coming off him in a way I had seen exactly twice before and misfiled both times. Half demon. By his mother's blood, the old Guiche matriarch had traveled to the Dark Continent in her youth and come back with more than souvenirs, and a throne he had inherited without ever wanting, on a continent he had spent his whole life pretending not to belong to. That is why he wore other people's bodies, not for fun. Because a half-demon phoenix walking around the East District in his own skin is a diplomatic incident with wings.
He had come hunting the Third King's faction on his own account for our daughter's stolen soul bead, and he had been close.
Weeks of work, whole strongholds unmade quietly, an entire vendetta conducted in the dark while I thought he was dicing radishes. And then Seraphina beat him. The Third King's daughter, smiling, well-mannered, a professional in a family of amateurs, had figured out what he was hunting before he arrived. So she absorbed Xiao Yun's soul bead into herself, which is not a thing you can undo, and then handed him a decoy, a constructed body wearing Zarthak Baneclaw's face and signature, positioned to be found, calibrated to die convincingly. He destroyed it. He believed the debt was paid. He came to find me in the burning factory with the news that our daughter's murderer was dead, and I had to look at the man who had spent months in my kitchen grieving and tell him he had been played. I want to be precise about his reaction, because it explains everything he did afterward. He did not rage. He did not go back for Seraphina. That was the first thing I braced for. And he read it on my face and said no. He said, "She wants me to come. That is why she left me alive to find out." Then he asked me, formally, in the language demons use for oaths, to hold the debt for him. Because a father who charges into that trap dies, and a father who waits becomes something the trap cannot survive. I have never respected him more, and I have never been more sure that Seraphina had made the single worst investment of her life. That bead is still in her. It is one of 2 entries in my ledger that were never resolved before the world got rolled back. And when Ai Li folded my children into capsules on that last morning, Xiao Yun went under, still 1 soul bead short of whole. She will get it back. She is going to get it back 10,000 years early from a demon princess who will not have been born yet and who will therefore never see it coming. Extraction from the Dark Continent came courtesy of a headline I did not order. The Beast King himself, Lei Yong, crossing the rift with an army because reports said East District females were in the factory. Purple hair in a war camp is very visible. So is a heavily pregnant innkeeper walking out of a burning demon facility with a phoenix chick on her shoulder. Our eyes met across the battlefield with the exact energy of 2 people who once shared a hot spring incident, and I did the mature thing, faked labor contractions so the entire expedition had to pack up and escort me home immediately. 2,000 soldiers, about face, forced march for 1 theatrical groan. Still my proudest logistics work. Aftermath. Duan Zheng got appointed deputy minister of the brand new exorcism division for his role in the case. Xiao Yun came home with slightly singed eyebrows and a 3-headed dog who had missed her at volume. And me? By royal decree, for my own protection, I was moved into the Beast King's palace, dumped into the royal harem wing, to be precise. Me, my luggage, my hellhound-owning daughter, and 100 ornamental court ladies who all wanted to know what the rat girl had that they didn't. Ladies, where do I start? The harem wing was 100 ornamental noblewomen who had spent years training for the attention of a king who had never once visited, and the arrival of a commoner with children by multiple fathers hit them like a heresy with luggage. Week 1, they tried protocol, precedence games, seating charts, the sniff. I run an inn. I outseated them at their own table. Week 2, they tried sabotage, my bathwater salted with itching herbs. I traced the herbs through my kitchen network in a day, and the culprit found her own legendary wardrobe donated, in her name, to Wei Cave Charity, publicly, with a plaque. Week 3, they discovered my actual function. I was the only person in the wing with stories, snacks, obstetric knowledge, and no interest in their king. By month's end, I was running the palace's first book club. Half the harem was besieging me for pregnancy luck advice, and 3 of the sensible ones had quietly asked my help drafting petitions to leave and marry men who actually looked at them. I processed all 3. The harem administrator developed a twitch, and through it all, the purple-haired landlord kept walking past my courtyard at breakfast. The Beast King courted me the way a glacier courts a coastline, slowly, massively, and with total confidence in the outcome. Understand the comedy here. Lei Yong had gone 10,000 years without touching a female. Not celibate by discipline, celibate by total absence of interest, a biological mystery his ministers had commissioned studies about. And then a pregnant rat girl fell into his bath, faked contractions at his army, moved into his palace, and suddenly the Beast King was finding reasons to walk past my courtyard at breakfast, every day, in increasingly elaborate outfits. The system, naturally, ruined it. Peak Spirit Realm was so far above my level cap that having his child was off the menu entirely. The bureaucracy said no before biology got a vote. I explained this to him with charts. He listened to the entire lecture about breeding brackets and point economies, nodded seriously, and said, "Fine, then we skip the child and keep the rest." The rest. The audacity of the rest. Reader, I kept the rest. He was 10,000 years of stored charm with nowhere to put it, and I am a widow several times over with excellent taste. I refused every throne-adjacent title that came sniffing around afterward, which confused the entire court and delighted me daily. And then, in the middle of all that palace warmth, the system dug up my past and handed it to me with a receipt, Li Feng. The name I had not said out loud since I died. My boyfriend on Earth. The cold, brilliant, untouchable man I loved with the whole stupid furnace of my first heart. The man whose child I once carried. The man who had it aborted without asking me, and then, when I became inconvenient in ways I did not understand at the time, had me removed. Removed as in, I was shot. That is how I died the first time. Not an accident, not an illness, a line item in someone's plan, signed by the man whose laundry I knew by smell. And the system's report said,
Li Feng is dead, died on Earth not long after me. I want to tell you I felt vindicated. What I felt was my chest caving in a palace garden, one whole death away from a man I should have hated cleanly. Loving your own murderer is a disease with no medicine. So I did the most expensive, least explicable thing I have done in 2 lives. I paid 10 million points to resurrect him. I did not have 10 million points. The system extended credit. Of course it extends credit for this, and I went 9.8 million points into debt, 27,000 years of my own life in the red, to restart the heart of the man who stopped mine. On Earth, where I could not see it, could not collect on it, would never hear a thank you. Then I asked Ai Li to help me stop loving him, and we archived him. Every warm memory, tagged, boxed, shelved. Not deleted, I am not a coward, just filed where it could not run my life anymore. I paid his debt and closed his account. That is who I am, if you were wondering. I collect nothing, I pay everything. And the universe was going to test that policy again before this story ends, so keep the receipt. Palace life, meanwhile, tried to kill me the normal way, politics. Princess Lei Huifeng, my academy mean girl, now doubly furious because both Duan Zheng and her royal uncle orbited me, bribed the palace midwife wizard to arrange an accident at my next delivery. Simple plan, old as harems. Mother dies in childbirth, everyone sighs, nobody checks. Unfortunately for her, my prenatal care includes a system with camera access. The bribe, the instructions, her face, all of it played on a light screen in front of the assembled court like the season finale it deserved. The Beast King watched his niece's masterpiece in silence, then married her off to a Bear Clan chieftain in the frozen north with a dowry and a warning. The midwife got worse. Old Madame Feng arrived at the palace 2 weeks after the Dark Continent, and the palace has not fully recovered. She came unannounced, on foot, through the front gate, and the guards let her through because the guards were 60 years old, and their fathers had told them stories. Feng Haoran's mother, retired matriarch of the Guish Phoenix clan, a woman whose official biography lists 9 campaigns, and whose unofficial one includes an incident where she walked into the Demon Emperor's throne room over a personal matter and walked back out, and the Demon Emperor did not. She wanted to inspect my daughter. I want to be clear that this was not a family visit. It was an assessment of a mixed blood cub born to a rat by the last living authority on what a phoenix is, and the entire East District held its breath for it. If she ruled against Xiao Yun, the clan would never accept her. If the clan never accepted her, then every Shen Ru Mei in that hemisphere would read it as an open season notice. Xiao Yun was 4. Recovering, missing a soul bead and carrying a memory block she did not know about, and she walked out into the courtyard in front of the scariest woman on 2 continents wearing a hellhound on a leash, looked her up and down with total composure and said, "You're the grandmother," not a question. The old woman's face did something no historian has recorded. Then she took out the Wind's Sacrifice bracelet, the clan's oldest heirloom, an ancestral artifact that chooses only pure-blooded Guish, and it had accepted nobody in 3 generations, which was the clan's quiet scandal, and the reason the matriarch had come herself instead of sending an envoy. It cannot be bribed, coached, or faked. That is exactly why the aristocracy loves it. It locked onto my daughter's wrist like it had been starving. Not accepted. Locked. It has not come off since, and per the clan archivists, it now runs warmer than any recorded holder, including the founder, which the archivists have chosen to describe as an anomaly under study. So, Xiao Yun, heir to the Phoenix clan by the ruling of an object no politician can argue with, her grandmother, immovable. And the 2 of them took to each other on the spot with the immediate professional respect of apex predators. The old woman teaching her to hold fire in an open palm. The child teaching the old woman that a 3-headed dog is a perfectly reasonable indoor animal. Old Madame Feng did me one more courtesy before she left, and it was not a small one. She asked, in private, exactly what had happened to her granddaughter, and I told her all of it. The gray cloak, the soul bead, the talisman, the second murder that had not happened yet but that I could feel coming from the fire lineages. She listened without moving. Then she said, "The first time, my son failed her. The second time will not exist." And she went home and made some calls. And there is a reason that in all my remaining time in that world, no Phoenix aristocrat ever moved against my daughter through official channels again. Shen Ru Mei moved anyway, later, unofficially, which is a different chapter, and a worse one. But I learned something in that courtyard I have used ever since. The fastest way to protect a child in a world of bloodline politics is to find the one immovable object in the system and let it fall in love with her. And then there was the wrong house. Remember blue-haired Wrong Wu? I like this female, wrong somehow? The wrongness had a diagnosis, and the diagnosis had a childhood. The wrong heir had been a gentle boy once, Wrong Ruo, the firstborn, water-natured in every sense, until his mother died and his father installed a stepmother who understood exactly one technology, breaking heirs quietly. Years of it. Locked cellars framed as discipline, meals as leverage, his small kindnesses punished as weakness, until kindness itself learned to hide. And hide it did. The boy's mind built a bodyguard, a second self with no soft parts at all, and handed him the keys. Wrong Wu, the cold public heir,
the one who outfroze the stepmother at her own game, avenged the household ledger item by item, and ran the family like winter. The original, the gentle one, had been a passenger in his own life for years, surfacing only in private, apologizing to servants for things his other half did. Two souls, one body. One of them courting me out of curiosity, and the other watching through the same eyes, and slowly, terribly, falling in an entirely different way. It was Rongrua who surfaced, hesitant as dawn, and kidnapped me. Politest kidnapping of my career. Rongrua's beach needs its full length, because it is the only death in this chronicle I might have prevented, and did not. The trip south was 3 days by sea, and he spent all of them apologizing. Not for the kidnapping, for his other self. For a comment Rongwu had made at a banquet. For a servant Rongwu had dismissed. For a decade of things a cold second personality had done with hands they shared, catalogued by the gentle one who had watched every single one from behind his own eyes, and could not reach the controls. I told him, somewhere around the second day, that a passenger is not liable for the driver. He thought about that for an hour, and then said the thing that should have told me everything. Then the passenger should get out. South District is merman country. Pearl beaches, tides that glow at night, a whole civilization built along a coastline where the water is warmer than the air. He had arranged everything. A house on the sand, food I liked, no servants, no schedule. 3 days of the most restful time I had in that entire life. He showed me how the tide glow works. He was funny, which nobody in that family knew. He asked about my children, one at a time, by name, and listened to the answers like they were the news. On the last evening, he told me his plan. He said the body had room for one. He said Rongwu was better at everything that world required. Better at the family, better at the politics, better at surviving a house that had eaten its own children, and that the arrangement had been temporary for 11 years, and had quietly become permanent without anyone deciding. He was tired. Not sad, he wanted me to know. Tired. He intended to stop surfacing. I argued for 4 hours. I am a professional closer, and I argued like the commission was my soul, that he was not a passenger, that his brother self existed because he had built it, that a mind that constructs its own bodyguard is not the weak one in the room. I told him about my first life. I told him about the warehouse floor, which I had told exactly nobody in that world. I used every instrument in the kit. He listened to all of it. He was the best listener I have ever had. Then he smiled the way sad people smile when you have been kind to them, and asked if he could hold my hand. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Reader, I have spent years going over that moment, and I cannot find the version of me that says no. He was a merman. I did not know what that handshake was. In merman custom, a lifespan can be gifted, not shared, not lent, given, poured out entire from one body into another, and it is irreversible, and it is legal, and it is considered the highest expression of regard their culture has. 1,362 years came up my arm in a warmth I mistook, for 1 second, for affection. Lee started screaming numbers at me halfway through, and I could not let go. You cannot let go. That is the entire design of it. And by the time the transfer ended, his hand had already gone cool in mine. He left me his years. He left a deep blue pearl where his heart had been, which merfolk say is what remains when a lifespan is given rather than spent. And he left a brother alone in a body built for two, who came back up into a corpse-cold house on a beach and understood in about 4 seconds what had happened, and who has never once, in all the years after, blamed me out loud. And he left one more thing, which I found out weeks later in the standard way. I was carrying his child. Number 7. A parting gift from a man who decided the best possible use of forever was to hand it to somebody who would spend it on other people. I keep the pearl in my space, where the children sleep. Some debts you never pay off, you just carry them somewhere warm. And on the last morning of the world, when 6 men opened their veins for me, the drops in my palm numbered 6 and not 7, and I felt that absence like a missing tooth. 2 births came that season, back to back, and the universe finally started showing its hand about my children. Number 6. Duan Zheng's son, a 6-tailed deer with heaven rank wind and space talents, and a bonus line on the system readout I had never seen before. Special talent, absolute balance judgment. My space nerd's baby came pre-installed with a cosmic gavel. 100,000 points on delivery, and the system ticked up to 99% of its next evolution. We nicknamed him Grape because his newborn beast form was round, purple-sheened, and rolled with intent. Elder Duan fainted with pride at the naming and had to be revived to faint again. Number 7. Rongruo's daughter, Xiaoyang, and she came out double, a tiny white rat that shimmered under moonlight into a deep-sea blue merbaby. 2 forms, fire and water talents both at heaven rank, and eyes the color of her father's pearl. The palace declared her the most beautiful infant in recorded history, and the palace was underselling it. Which brings us to the letter of commitment, the single funniest legal document in Beast World history. Lei Yang, the Beast King, 10,000-year bachelor, ruler of half a continent, could not biologically have children with me, so he solved it like a king. He adopted. He drew up formal succession papers making Xiaoyang his crown princess, sealed with his royal signet and her inked paw print, tiny toes and all. A rat-merman hybrid, heir to the beast throne, appointed at 6 days old on the grounds that, quote, she is clearly superior to every noble in this court.
The court had opinions. The court expressed none of them out loud, because the last person to object to something the king wanted was still being used as an example. 7 children, 3 districts, a palace, an inn, a hellhound, a pearl. My timer read hundreds of years in the black, my debt read millions in the red, and the system pinged, quietly, that its next evolution was ready, which is when everything I had built got picked up by the collar and thrown into a war. The Holy War announcement arrived the way all terrible news arrives in a palace, as an invitation. Here is the shape of it, as Lei Yong explained it to me with the expression of a man reading his own autopsy. Every era, a power above all the continents, the Holy Church, seat of the Holy King, convenes the Holy War. Spirit rank males from every world in its reach are conscripted to compete. The prize is grotesque, breeding rights to the holy female, a woman elevated to sacred status for 1 generation. The losers, and there are only losers, plural, in the thousands, die. All of them. It is a tournament where second place and last place get the same trophy, and the trophy is a grave. And the conscription list for our world had names on it I knew, every spirit rank male. Lei Yong, Gao Jian, Feng Haoran, Duan Zheng, freshly broken through. Every father of every child I had, minus a dead rabbit, all drafted into a meat grinder run by a church I had never heard of, for the honor of some stranger's sacred womb. Li added the personal touch. As an unregistered anomaly, my memory of all of them would be wiped when the war concluded. The system above systems keeps things tidy. I want you to know I took the news calmly. The garden pavilion I was standing in took it less calmly, on account of catching fire. Then the rules revision dropped, and everything changed. The church, in its wisdom, announced an exemption. Males with living offspring were excused from the draft. Some committee upstairs had decided proven fathers were more valuable as breeders than as corpses. The Palace Herald read it out like a weather report, and I sat there doing the fastest inventory of my life. Gao Jian, father of Ah Feng, exempt. Feng Haoran, father of Xiao Yun, exempt. Duan Zheng, father of Grape, exempt. Every man I had ever had a child with was suddenly, retroactively, immune because of the children. My chaotic, unplanned, point-farming, life-extending children had just become the 5 best decisions I never exactly made. Except Lei Yong, no offspring, drafted, and his steward Li Wei, a dry-witted veteran with a black sheep beast form who had survived a previous holy war and had the 1,000-yard stare to prove it, drafted again. And the northern beast king, Wei Gao, a silver unicorn wolf who reportedly greeted the news by laughing and asking when, drafted, delighted, a battle maniac finally being handed a legal war. So that was the team. My king, his steward, and a wolf who thought death tournaments were a spa weekend. I did what I could, and what I could turned out to be a lot, and most of it was embarrassing. First, contingency genetics. If the fathers of my future children were going to be scattered across a war, I was not letting the bloodlines walk out the door uninsured. The system store sells preservation for biological samples. I will not elaborate. Gao Jian handled the request with dignity. Duan Zheng required 3 explanations and a diagram and turned the color of a stop sign. Feng Haoran asked if he could watch the diagram explanation again. The samples went into cold storage in my space, filed alphabetically, because I am a professional. Second, the children. I called in every one of them I could reach and packed them like a mother sending kids to a war-adjacent summer camp. Each child got a storage bag, spatial luxury goods, stuffed with pills, talismans, snacks, and letters to open if things went wrong. Ah Feng got a lightning-grade defensive array. Xiao Yun got fire suppressants for the Hellhound and a note excusing her from all future kidnappings, to show to any kidnapper. Grape got extra snacks, because Grape's response to danger was to eat. Third, quietly, at night, through channels only a system can arrange, 3 packages went west. Beast taming pills, the boosters that only work on my own offspring, delivered anonymously to a rabbit clan household where triplets were growing up without me. 2 little girls and a boy who would wake up over the next months to find their talents inexplicably blooming. Their stepfamily would call it a miracle. I call it child support. The farewell tour was long, and I performed it badly. I am good at goodbyes the way I am good at everything, loudly, with jokes, and none of them were fooled. Gao Jian held my head against his chest so I could hear the purr, which is cheating. Duan Zheng gave me a spatial coordinate anchor keyed to his own core. If you are ever falling, anywhere, you fall to me, which is also cheating. Feng Haoran cooked a farewell dinner and said nothing at all, which from him was a sonnet. And Lei Yong, the one actually leaving for the meat grinder, spent his last evening not on strategy, but on paperwork, resealing Xiaoyong's succession documents, updating the palace stipends for my whole chaotic household, arranging guards for the inn, a 10,000-year-old king, staying up late to make sure a rat girl's life would run smoothly if he died in a church's game. Try to come back, I told him at the gate. Command voice, the one that works on foxes and debt collectors. He smiled like I had handed him a medal. Try to still be here. Team 9908 marched out at dawn. The number was their conscription code.
Remember it. It comes back later, engraved somewhere that will make your chest hurt. And me? I watched the gates close, went back to my rooms, opened the system interface, and looked at one very specific line item I had been ignoring for weeks. The Holy War conscript's spirit rank, males. It says nothing anywhere about pregnant females following the war as camp personnel. Lee had checked. Twice. I had made her check twice. Host, she said, with the resignation of software that knows its user. The paperwork is ready. Getting into a death tournament is easy. They never guard the entrance to the abattoir. Nothing sane walks in. The war's first phase convened on a continent called Lichuan, a staging world the church runs like a game board, seated with ferocious beasts and scored like an arcade. Kill monsters, earn points. Kill other teams, earn their points. The scoreboard hovered in the sky over the whole continent, visible from everywhere, a leaderboard of the doomed. Teams from a dozen worlds I had never heard of, species I could not always parse, all grinding up the rankings toward a prize most of them did not want, because the alternative to ranking was dying. I attached myself to Team 9908 as unregistered support staff, which is a sentence that did a lot of diplomatic work at the time. Lei Yong's reaction to my arrival deserves its own chapter, but the summary is 1 full hour of the Beast King lecturing me about danger while personally carrying my luggage to the best tent. Here is what I brought to a war between spirit-ranked titans as a mortal tier rat with a yellow rank flame, a wall hack, and an arms catalog. The system map does not care about stealth fields, ambush formations, or camouflage. Every beast, every rival team, every trap on Lichuan rendered for me in real time like a strategy game with the fog of war deleted. I sat in camp with T, watching the map, and fed my boys targeting data. Nest of abyssal wolves, 2 valleys east, 600 points, they sleep at noon. Rival team setting an ambush at the river crossing. Go around the ridge and it becomes your ambush. Li Wei, the veteran, took about 2 days to transition from polite skepticism to treating me like a classified military asset. He started calling me Control. I did not stop him. And when the map showed something too big for surgical strikes, we skipped surgery. The store shipped rocket launchers. There is footage in some church archive somewhere of an abyssal beast the size of a cathedral, a thing that had eaten 2 full teams that morning, taking a saturation barrage of 21st century ordnance from a picnic blanket position, while 3 spirit rank warriors stood behind me with their ears covered, learning new words for artillery. Lei Yong domesticated beautifully, by the way. That is the part of the war nobody expects me to report. Between battles, the ruler of the East District learned to pitch my tent to hotel standard, developed opinions about tea temperature, and once fought Wei Gao, actual combat, cratered a hillside, over who got to carry me across a river. The Wolf King thought escorting the pregnant lady was hilarious right up until he tried to take the job as a joke and discovered the king was not joking. I sat on a rock and let the 2 strongest beings on the continent settle it. A woman needs hobbies at war. We climbed the scoreboard like a rash, and the continent noticed, because continents always notice, and what happened next happened in a city called Kateluo. Phase 1 had a middle, and the middle is where I learned what the Holy War actually costs the people who aren't in the story. Between the scoreboard headlines, Lichuan is a continent with residents, farm villages that predate the tournament by centuries, fishing towns, 1 very stubborn monastery, all of them living inside an arena somebody else scheduled, all of them scored as terrain. When a team clears a beast nest for points, the nearby village celebrates. When 2 teams meet over that same nest, the village is a backdrop with a body count, and the committee's ledger records the incident under environmental attrition. I started keeping a second map, not the point map, a people map, where the non-combatants were, which valleys the teams were converging on, which roads a family could still use at night. Li Wei caught me at it on the 4th night, watched the overlay for a while, and asked in his driest voice whether Control was aware that villages award 0 points. 0 points, I agreed. Some merit, though. That's how the hidden quest started paying again. A flooded forge shored up before the refugee column reached it. A monastery's well unpoisoned. That one was deliberate. A rival team's tactic to force our patrol route. A berth in a barn outside Weimu village in the small hours with a system store kit and a terrified husband holding a lantern because I have delivered 11 of my own and this world's midwives had all been evacuated. The system paid out in points and, in that particular case, in a lifelong friend named Fang Su, who sent me dried plums by courier for years afterward, addressed to the foreign lady who yelled at me about breathing. The boys stopped questioning the detours around week 3. Wei Gao, the battle maniac, turned out to be the worst offender for it, a silver unicorn wolf who would cheerfully behead a rival captain and then spend a whole afternoon carrying an old woman's grain sacks up a hill because she reminded him of somebody. Lei Yong noticed the arithmetic before anyone. Teams that made enemies of the countryside were getting bad intelligence, bad water, and ambushed at fords. Teams that made friends got warned. By the end of Phase 1, half of Lichuan's back roads were quietly working for 9908, and none of it showed up on the committee's board. That is my whole strategic doctrine, if anyone's taking notes. Be the team the villages want to survive. The Beast Tower of Kateluo deserves its own entry, because I went up it too, and what I found on the 9th floor explains everything that happened on the last one. The tower is a spawn column, a shaft driven down into a thin place in the world, where abyssal pressure squeezes monsters up through the floors like water through a straw. Climb it, kill what comes, collect. The committee scored it as the continent's premier farm, and the local governor scored it as the reason his city still had walls. I climbed with Lei Yong and Li Wei on the 7th day, riding along as artillery and eyes. Floors 1 through 8 were exactly the advertisement: pressure, teeth, my rockets making an obscenity of the difficulty curve. Floor 9 was different. Floor 9 had been swept already, recently, by something that killed with total economy, and the corpses were arranged. Not scattered, arranged. 9 abyssal beasts laid in a ring, heads inward, in a pattern my system flagged as a summoning geometry 2,000 years out of local fashion. Somebody was using the committee's premier farm as a ritual site under the noses of 200 contestants at the exact hinge of the war. We reported it. Of course we reported it. Lei Yong is a king. King's file reports. The committee's liaison thanked us for our diligence, logged the incident, and did nothing. And I watched the liaison's face while he did the nothing and learned the shape of the rot for the first time. He wasn't corrupt. He was bored. Whatever was happening in that tower was already on somebody's schedule several floors above his. 9 days later, a 9-lived cat met a king's clone at the top of that same tower, and the seals under the city, the ones that ring of corpses had been quietly filing away at, let go all at once. I keep that report in my space with the rest of my receipts. It's the first document in my collection where the crime is committed by an institution rather than a person, and I have been reading paperwork differently ever since. Kateluo was the phase's crown jewel, a fortress city built around a beast tower, where the abyss pressed close to the surface and monsters spawned in the deeps like bubbles in a pot. Climbing the tower was the fastest point farm on the continent. Every ambitious team came through Kateluo eventually. So did contestant 0048. She looked like nothing. A slight catwoman with tired eyes and a scavenger's coat, ranked modestly, always alone, always surviving fights she should not have survived. Her name in the rolls was Shi Ying, and my system flagged 3 things about her in the first minute. 1. She was from Earth, my Earth, a 21st century soul, same as me, wearing this world like a rented suit. 2. She had 9 lives, actual, mechanical, respawning 9 lives. 3. The abyssal beasts of Kateluo did not attack her. They obeyed her. I flagged her as dangerous to everyone who would listen. The trouble with being control is that men who can crater hillsides develop selective hearing about small, tired women. Lei Yong took the tower alone that day, routine climb, 4 kills on the upper floors, his usual efficiency. And on the top floor, Shi Ying was waiting, with the abyss at her back and every beast in the deeps rising at her call. What happened up there? The scoreboard reported with the emotional range of a stock ticker. Contestant, Lei Yong. Status, deceased. Points transferred. I was in camp when the ticker updated. I remember the teacup being in my hand, and then the teacup being nowhere, and Li Wei saying something from very far away, though he was standing next to me. 10,000 years old, bathed in dragonfire, walked out of demon sieges, survived everything this world had thrown at him for 100 of my lifetimes, and a stock ticker in the sky said a cat had ended him on a Tuesday. Do not joke here. I did not. The city died the same hour. Whatever Shi Ying had done at the top of the tower cracked the seals below it, and the abyss came up like a burst pipe, beasts by the thousand. The fortress walls breached from inside. 100,000 residents and refugee teams running as the deep ate the streets. The scoreboard registered the destruction of Kateluo City as an environmental event. No points awarded. Here's what I did with the worst day of my 3rd life. I inventoried. The store had munitions I had been too civilized to buy. I bought all of them. And I went down into the dying city, 8 months pregnant, on foot, wall hack blazing, a rat with a rocket launcher and a spreadsheet of grief, and I hunted a 9-lived cat through the apocalypse she had ordered. The map made it chess against a blindfolded opponent. She could not hide. I saw every life she had like candles on a readout. She spent 1 escaping a collapsed avenue I shelled, 1 to a grenade cluster in the sewers she thought were hers, 1 to her own beasts turned by pain when I burned the pheromone gland she used to steer them. I fed her lives into the fire 1 by 1 across a night and a day, and the last one ended in the tower's rubble with her staring at me, finally understanding what had been chasing her. Not a warrior, not a champion. A woman from her own world, with her own world's manners. You're from home, she said. We could have. We could not have. The launcher agreed. Her accumulated points transferred to me with a chime. Thousands of them. Hers and everyone's she had taken, including a dead king's 4 final kills. The system offered a celebratory jingle. I declined it. I want to tell you about one more contestant before this phase ends, because the seed she planted grows for the rest of this war. In the refugee columns leaving Kateluo, there was a rabbit girl named Jiang Meihua, sweet-faced, soft-spoken, the kind of pretty that makes strong men stupid and me suspicious on principle. The columns loved her. She wept for the city. She helped the wounded. And on the second night, when her teammate, a kind lizard woman named Lyra, who had shared rations with half the column, outlived her usefulness, Jiang Meihua took her head off in her sleep and banked the points. I know because the map does not blink, and neither do I. Everyone else knew a tragedy had struck poor Meihua's team in the night. I filed her. The ledger is patient. Phase 1 closed with Team 9908, reduced, hollowed, my king's name grayed out on the roster, in second place on the continent. The survivors packed for Phase 2 in silence. Li Wei folded Lei Yong's camp chair last, the way you fold a flag, and I looked at the grayed out name until my eyes stopped working and told the system, in the tone I once used on loan sharks, check again. Phase 2 convened on a continent called the North Boundary, all glacier teeth and iron sky, and it opened with a resurrection. He walked into our camp 11 days in, through a whiteout, wearing frost to the eyebrows and the expression of a man mildly late to dinner. Purple hair, insufferable posture, alive. The thing that died in Kate Luo Tower, it turned out, was a projection clone, an old king's paranoid habit, deployed for routine climbs precisely because towers are where assassins wait. The death had been real enough to fool the scoreboard, which does not distinguish essence from echo, and Lei Yong had spent the gap walking out of the wilderness while something ancient woke up in his blood. The near death had triggered a bloodline awakening. My hybrid king, mixed blood his whole life and quietly sneered at for it by purebred aristocracy, came back from his own funeral with an ice dragon uncoiling in his veins. I hit him, then the other thing, then I hit him again. He accepted all three as fair. Li Wei wept into a supply crate and pretended it was the wind. Wei Gao demanded a duel with the new dragon bloodline for science and was declined. The camp glowed for days. But two shadows came in with the good news, and they matter. First, someone had arranged Kate Luo. Lei Yong is 10,000 years of careful, and clones do not get ambushed by 9-lived abyss operators through luck. Somebody had leaked his climb schedule. Somebody wanted 9,908 broken specifically. Not dead, broken, demoralized into losing. This war had a hand inside it that was not playing for points. Second, I finally saw the hand's sleeve. White robes, observers that the other teams could not see, figures at the edge of battlefields, watching not the battles, but me. Ai Li went silent whenever they appeared, which from my chatterbox system was a scream. When she finally spoke, she used her smallest voice. They are from the committee. Host, they know what Ai Li is. Arc System 002 is not supposed to exist anymore. The others like Ai Li were all recalled and destroyed. If they confirm it, they will not punish the host. They will delete Ai Li. Recalled and destroyed. My system, my needy, glitchy, gradually growing a soul corporate parasite, was the last survivor of a discontinued product line, and the white robes were the recall team. I told her nobody was deleting anybody. She cleared her own emotion cache before the higher process could do it for her, which is the saddest sentence I know how to say about software. The camp drama, meanwhile, wrote itself. Someone fed Lei Yong a rumor that I had grown close to Wei Gao during the morning weeks. The Wolf King had carried me across 3 rivers, purely as a delivery service. My freshly resurrected dragon spent 2 days being magnificently, wordlessly wounded about it. Then I cornered him against his own tent pole and explained, with diagrams, that a woman who shells cities for him does not need her loyalty audited. The makeup portion of that argument is redacted, but I will report its consequence, because the consequence rearranged the war and possibly the world. The system chimed a week later with an announcement it had never made before. No pregnancy pill involved, no store assistance, no system mediation of any kind. Host, this is a natural conception. Ai Li said it the way you would report a sunrise at midnight. Because here is the thing I learned in that tent, at that chime. Hosts like me are chosen for broken bodies. Every woman bound to a childbirth system across every world was recruited at death with her fertility already ruined. Mine ended on an operating table Li Feng booked. Because a womb that cannot conceive without the system is a womb the system controls. It is the leash. It is the whole business model. And my body had just, quietly, without permission from anyone's software, healed. 10,000 years of an unlovable king's stored up warmth, an ice dragon's blood. Whatever this world had slowly been giving back to me, child number 8 existed because 2 people wanted each other. And for the first time in the history of the product line, the leash had grown a flower. The system flipped into a mode I had never seen. Infinite protection. Priority override. Every safety the store sold, comped. Even the processes above Ai Li seemed to hold their breath around my belly, the way you go quiet in a room where something impossible is sleeping. Lei Yong, informed he had done the one thing 10 millennia of court physicians called impossible, reacted with the dignity you would expect. He told the entire continent. There are still glaciers in the North Boundary, with the announcement carved into them at dragon scale. Before the phase ended, the rabbit came back into frame, and this time she had a weapon no launcher answers, paperwork. Jiang Meihua had clawed her way to first place on the leaderboard, grief farming, ally harvesting, that sweet face banking heads the whole way, and first place, it turns out, comes with privilege cards. Church-issued, rule-backed, non-negotiable coupons, and the card she cashed was this, the right to requisition any contestant onto her team for a rotation. She picked Lei Yong, not for strategy, her team was fine. She picked the newly resurrected, newly dragon-blooded, newly expectant father specifically because the scoreboard's sweetheart wanted the scoreboard's best story standing next to her, and because taking him from the pregnant camp follower everyone whispered about was free entertainment. The requisition was legal, the church enforced it. My king packed his own bedroll, jaw set like a fault line, and went to be a trophy on a rabbit's shelf for a full rotation while I drank tea in our camp and thought about the range on various store products. She did it twice. The second time, she timed the card to land on the day of my first prenatal scan, which even Li Wei, a man who once described a massacre as brisk, called artistic. Both rotations, Lei Yong did the one thing available to a conscripted trophy. He was catastrophically, monumentally useless. The strongest contestant on the continent developed sudden chronic exhaustion, misread every map, oversalted the team's rations, and answered all of Jiang Meihua's conversational overtures with lectures about his upcoming child. By rotation's end, she returned him early, the way you return a defective appliance. I met him at the camp edge with tea. Sabotage? Fatherhood, he said, is very tiring. The ledger noted the rabbit's name a second time, in ink. Phase 3 moved us to the fake holy capital, and I do mean fake. The church had built a full-scale replica of its own sacred city as an arena, marble avenues and cathedral spires with scoring sensors in the gargoyles. War as theme park. The teams walked in expecting a final bloodbath, and instead, the opening week was festivals, feasts, free everything. Fatten the stock before the finale. Even I ate the bread, and I knew it was a farm. The fake holy capital had a middle too, and the middle is where I stopped being a camp follower and started being a problem with the filing system. The festival weeks were surveillance weeks. Free food is the best cover in any world. A woman eating her fourth pastry at a public fountain is invisible, and a woman eating her fourth pastry while her system maps every ward line, patrol rotation, and scoring sensor in a replica city is a siege in progress. By the end of week 2, I had the arena's entire nervous system in my pocket, including the thing that mattered most. The sensors were the same make as the ones in the real capital, because the church builds its practice worlds from stock parts. Everything I learned in the fake city would work in the real one. That is how a rat ends up with the floor plan of the holiest place in 9 worlds before she has ever seen it. The contestants, meanwhile, were being fattened and knew it, and different species handle that differently. The lizard teams got quiet. The bird clans got loud. A group of stone-skinned giants from a world I could not pronounce spent the entire festival season building a monument in the plaza out of banquet furniture, which the church filmed for its archives, and which was, if you looked at it from the cathedral steps, a very large, obscene gesture aimed at the sky. I brought them wine on the last night. We did not share a language. We managed. And I ran a small business because I cannot help it. Information brokerage. Teams pay well for the location of a beast nest, and better for the location of each other. I sold both, honestly, at rates that undercut the committee's own quartermasters, and by the end of the phase, I had a client list that included half the top 10 and a reputation as the neutral party you could buy from without being betrayed. That reputation is not a virtue, it is a business model. Betray one client and the whole book closes. The book bought me the thing that mattered later. When I finally moved on the committee, 4 teams who owed me nothing but good trades declined to interfere, and one, the Stone Giants, sat down in the plaza and refused to be deployed at all. 2 other scenes from those weeks, both of which I owe you. The first, Li Wei, our veteran, got drunk exactly once and told me what the previous Holy War had been like from inside. He had been young, his team had been 11. They came home 3, and the memory wipe took the war itself, but left the shape of it. He woke up for a century afterward knowing he had lost 8 friends and unable to remember one face. That is the mercy the church advertises. He asked me, very carefully, whether my system could refuse the wipe. I told him it could. He nodded, drank, and said, "Then remember it for me this time." And I said I would, and I have, and that is why this account exists at all. The second, I met the holy female of the previous era, not in the fake capital, in its refugee quarter, where the church houses staff nobody looks at. An old woman sweeping a portico who stopped when I passed and stared at my belly with an expression I could not read, and then said, in a voice like paper, "They let you keep it?" I sat down on that portico step and stayed 3 hours. She had been 19 when they crowned her. She could not remember the name she was born with. Her childbirth system had been stripped out of her at the end of her term, the extraction the archives call routine, and what was left could still sweep, still eat, still answer questions, and could not want anything. She was not bitter. That was the worst part. There was nothing left in there to be bitter with. I gave her my name, which was stupid, and a heavenly treasure fruit, which was worse, and she ate it and said thank you, and went back to sweeping. I did not know yet that her stolen system was walking around the arena on a rabbit's back, ranked first, banking heads. I found that out later, in a sealed archive, and when I did, every single thing I did to Jiang Meihua afterward stopped being about the slap. That is where the deacon found me. He introduced himself as Raphael, a holy deacon, mid-rank clergy, assigned to oversee contestant welfare, a tall, white gold creature with the kind of beauty that reads as a rendering error, entirely too interested in a pregnant camp follower from a frontier world. He kept appearing. At the bakery, at the fountains. At my elbow at the night market, holding the exact pastry I had been about to buy, wearing the smile of a man who has read your file and liked it. My scam detector, which has survived 2 deaths, sang like a kettle. But here is the thing, he never lied on the words. Ai Li ran him for falsehood every time and came back clean, which was its own red flag. Nobody is that honest except things that do not need to lie. The mask came off on the cathedral roof, at night, where he had lured me with the promise of a view worth the climb. The view was him. 6 wings. 6. White gold, each one the size of a sail, filling the sky over the fake city with light that made the scoring gargoyles avert their lenses. An angel, an actual angel, and not a deacon. Raphael, Holy Prince, first in line to the Holy King's throne, slumming in the contestant pens because the church's chosen prize female bored him, and something about an anomalous rat woman with a wall hack did not. Angels only reveal their true form to a mate, Ai Li whispered, with the tone of someone reading the fine print after the signature. By his customs, host, he has just proposed. I looked at the 6-wing prince of the organization currently farming my species for sport, glowing at me like a wedding announcement. I'm already pregnant, I said. By a dragon, who is armed. I am patient, said the angel, and the terrifying thing is that angels mean that geologically. The rabbit and the angel collided over me, which sounds flattering until you see the bill. Zhang Meihua had noticed the clergy's new favorite because noticing was her superpower, and she deployed her endgame privilege card, an interdiction. Church enforced, rule backed. Lei Yong legally barred from approaching me. Not requisitioned this time. Fenced off. My child's father could stand at the boundary line of our own camp and no closer, while she stood inside the line to explain, sweetly, publicly, that rules were rules and perhaps the little mother should rest instead of causing scenes. I caused a scene. I slapped her. Open palm, full sales floor follow-through, the crack of it echoing off replica marble. The plaza went silent the way plazas do when someone touches the leaderboard's darling. And her sweet face flickered, one frame, one single frame of something old and cold and delighted. Because contestant harm outside sanctioned combat triggers church punishment protocols, and the protocols do not care who started it. The light came down on me like a verdict. It had begun deciding what to subtract from an unrest pregnant female when 6 wings unfolded over the plaza, and the protocols developed a sudden interest in being elsewhere. Raphael had spent his own coin publicly. Princes do not shield camp followers for free. Everyone watching now knew the anomaly mattered to the throne. So I did what you do when a debt appears on your books uninvited. I renegotiated it into a contract. Deal with the angel, struck on the cathedral steps, his armory's anti-abyss weapon schematics, plus the blueprint for canceling privilege cards, in exchange for my continued, unbothered, extremely platonic company at a reasonable number of night markets. The rabbit's fence came down within the week. She smiled at me across the plaza like we had all the time in the world. We did not, but the reason we did not was still 3 moves away. 2 women joined my war that phase, one wearing a stolen life, one avenging hers. A team called Death Gaze had been shadowing our camp, and its captain, Wang Fan, kept finding excuses to get close to me. The system pinged her as wrong on the first pass. Her registration said Red Fox, 3 tails, a witch of the Thorn line, but the soul wearing that body scanned as something else entirely, squatting in it. Identity theft, the total kind. The original owner found me first. Alara Thorn, Lara, once I earned the nickname, crawled out of the refugee understreets half dead in a borrowed body of her own, a witch reduced to embers, to warn the camp Wang Fan was circling. Her story, the thief had taken her name, her body, her tails, 3 lives, the Thorn inheritance, and left her to die in a ditch with 1 guttering spare. She wanted her body back or she wanted it burned. She was not particular. We did it together, and I will keep the details for a longer night, but the shape of it, the map that does not blink, a foxfire ambush, and a thief discovering that the 2 most dangerous things on the continent are a witch with nothing to lose and a saleswoman with a grudge ledger. Lara got her burning done. What was left of Huang Fan would fit in an urn if anyone had liked her enough to buy one. Lara stayed. Sharp-tongued, chain-drinking, loyal like gravity, the first friend, not husband, not child, not employee this world had given me. She taught Xiao Yun foxfire shapes by letter. She called Raphael the seagull. She called Lei Yong your lizard. She called me, eventually, sister. Remember that. It will cost us both. Child number 8 arrived in the middle of a war zone, which by our family standards counts as a home birth. Labor started during a scoring skirmish on the replica city's outskirts. There was no midwife within a continent. There was a beast king with 2 centuries of battlefield medicine and hands that could crack glaciers, kneeling in a commandeered chapel, following the system's delivery instructions off a light screen I projected between contractions, both of us pretending our voices were steady. That is how the ruler of the East District came to personally deliver his own first child in 10,000 years. The child was an egg, a golden egg patterned in scale lines, warm as a hearth and heavy as a debt. Dragon Lion offspring incubate. The readout printed the specifications while Lei Yong held it like the concept of glass was invented for this exact object. True Flame Dragon Lion, Spirit rank at birth, Fire Arcana, Ice Arcana, True Dragon Bloodline, and Soul Talent, Rule of Fate. Rule of Fate.
The system needed a moment before explaining that one, and its explanation had error bars. And then it stopped mattering because the reward line printed, and the reward line broke the economy. Natural conception bonus. Reward, 100 million points. 100 million in one delivery. The number I had been sold at minute 1 of this life, the grand prize, the return to Earth jackpot, the carrot for 100 births, paid out in a single chime because 2 people had a baby the old-fashioned way. My debt from resurrecting Li Feng, erased. My balance, obscene. I Li made a sound I can only describe as software weeping. We named nothing yet. Dragon Lion Custom. The name waits for the hatch. The father held the egg through the night watch and told it the entire administrative history of the East District, which will either bond them forever or explain a lot later. And then I looked at the scoreboard through the chapel's broken window, at the fake city, at the fattening festivals, at the finale coming for every male I loved, and I made the kind of decision my balance could finally afford. They were done. All of them. I was not asking the church's permission. The transaction remains the largest in Li's records. 1 billion points. 812 million of it borrowed against future births, a debt that would have made me faint in year 1. Purchase order. Emergency long-range teleport. 4 passengers. Lei Yong, Li Wei, Wei Gao, 1 golden egg, from the war zone back to the East District, plus a sealing writ on our entire home continent. 1,000 years. No holy war conscription, no church writ, no white robes crossing that line for a millennium. The whole world bought out of the tournament. Lei Yong refused to go, so I lied to him, told him the transfer was a 2-way test run, and hit send on his face. The last thing through the closing portal was the beginning of the word Su Yan in a register that cracked the chapel's remaining windows. He would forgive me. Fathers with eggs forgive. Then I was alone at the holy war, out of protectees, 800 million in the red, and in the mood to renegotiate my relationship with the management. Here is a sentence I never expected my biography to contain. I opened fire on the Holy War Committee's administrative tower with incendiary ordnance from a cafe patio. Ranging shots first. I am not an animal. I let the clerks evacuate. Then I walked my fire up the marble floor by floor while the fake city's alarms sang. And between salvos, I broadcast my demands on the contestant channel like an extremely specific pirate radio station. The demands were modest. Cancel my registration anomalies, release the conscription records, and stop pretending nobody upstairs was steering the war because I had a map that did not blink, a list of scheduled accidents, including 1 clone ambush in a tower, and this part I invented with total conviction, a super weapon from my homeworld in my storage space with a dead man trigger. I described the weapon in loving detail. I had watched a lot of movies on Earth. The fake Death Star speech has never failed me with an audience that cannot check. The committee blinked first, which is what committees do when a line item becomes unpredictable. And in the middle of the negotiation, the scoreboard resolved Phase 3's mathematics with everyone's favorite plot twist. My points stood. The camp follower registration Raphael had quietly formalized. Shi Ying's inherited thousands, the tower's own destruction bounties. The anomaly at the cafe table was not just a contestant. By raw arithmetic, the anomaly had won the Holy War. First place, 100 million points in prize money, the Rabbit's Kingdom of Banked Heads came second, and, in my single favorite line of church jurisprudence ever written, Jiang Meihua was fined 20 million points, payable to me, for unsanctioned interference with the victor. The slap, retroactively, became evidence. I would like to report that I celebrated. What actually happened is that the sky over the fake holy capital turned gold. Every bell in the real one began to ring somewhere beyond the horizon, and the church announced its own winner's math. The old holy king had died in his sleep, at the exact hinge of the war. The succession fell to his radiant firstborn, Raphael, 6 wings, patience of geology, who accepted the throne with becoming grief, and whose first act as holy king was to exercise the crown's ancient privilege of naming the era's holy female. He read my name off a golden card in front of the assembled survivors of 9 worlds, with the tiny private smile of a man collecting on a night market debt. And his second act, delivered to me privately with the cathedral doors shut, was worse than the first, because it was honest. He told me what the Holy War actually is. Not selection, not sacred right. Entertainment. A betting sport for the powers of the upper continents, worlds so far above the church that the church itself is their bookmaker, breeding interesting bloodlines the way Earth bred racehorses. The holy female is not an honor. She is a trophy mare in a stable run by an audience we will never see. You wanted the truth, said the new holy king. No one else in this cathedral could survive knowing it. That is why it has to be you. Angels do not lie. It is so much worse than lying. The 3 phases had an ending I have not told you properly, which is what a war does to the people who win it. Phase 1 closed with 9,908 in second place and a grayed-out name on the roster. Phase 2 closed with a resurrection, an ice dragon, and an impossible pregnancy. And Phase 3 closed with me alone at a cafe table, 800 million points in debt, watching a scoreboard declare a camp follower the champion of 9 worlds. Here is what winning bought.
The prize money, 100 million points, went straight into the hole I had dug, teleporting my family home and sealing our continent for 1,000 years. Beatrice's 20 million fine went in after it. I ended the greatest tournament in the known cosmos poorer than I started, with a continent that no longer exists on the church's conscription maps, and I would run that transaction again tomorrow. The survivors went home. That is the part the archives skip. 9 worlds worth of spirit rank males, conscripted to die for a betting sport, walked out of a fake city alive because a rat with a wall hack made the finale mathematically pointless, and every single one of them carried the memory wipe as standard procedure. They forgot the war. Most of them forgot each other. Li Wei kept his because I had promised him on a portico step, and because my system does not take orders from that particular department, and he has spent the years since writing down 8 names from a war a century earlier that he can finally remember the faces of. The stone giants took their banquet furniture monument home with them. It is apparently in a museum. The plaque, I am told, translates as the gesture that was permitted, and Li Chuan, the arena continent, with its farm villages and its fishing towns and its monastery and its back roads full of people who had been scored as terrain. Li Chuan came off the tournament rotation permanently as part of my settlement with the crown. Not because anyone in the church cared, because a woman with a superweapon story and a client list made it the first line of the negotiation, before her own titles, before her own body. Fang Su of Weimu village still sent dried plums after that. The couriers had to work out a new route, because the committee's supply corridors closed with the arena. I keep 1 plum stone from the last shipment in my space, next to the pearl, and the framed zero balance statement, and a child's drawing of a woman with a mop and a rocket launcher. That is my war record. Everything else in the archives is scoreboard. I refused the sacred title on the cathedral steps, publicly, in front of 9 world survivors. You could hear the doctrine crack. Holy females do not refuse. That is the entire theological point of them. And Raphael, new king, 6 wings, whole cathedral of leverage, did not enforce. He negotiated. We settled in a side chapel like 2 merchants, and Li notarized. 100 million points to me. My titles, ceremonial only. My body, my system, my children, mine. In exchange, 1 formal appearance at his coronation season, on my terms. My terms became the strangest night of a life that includes a rocket launcher cat hunt. 1 line, deadpan, as the house style demands. The appearance was private. The wings were involved. There was matter. I am legally required by the comedy gods to report this, role play, and the system chimed at dawn with child number 9 and a gestation estimate of 1 full year, because angel biology does nothing in a hurry. Raphael spent the morning after informing the palace staff, all of them, individually, radiantly, 10 millennia of church dignity, undone by a man glowing at gardeners. But under the honeymoon floor, the machinery had already started, because the church's oldest departments had lost a holy war, a holy king, and doctrine in 1 season, all to 1 rat, and their answer was on the books before my morning tea. Uninstall her. There was precedent. Li found it in a sealed archive and read it to me in her smallest voice. The last holy female who inconvenienced the institution had her childbirth system forcibly stripped. The extraction takes everything: fertility, lifespan ledger, the system itself, screaming out at the root. The woman survived it, if you are generous with the word. Centuries later, she was still in the church's lower city, hollow as a bell, and her stolen system had been refitted and reissued. Reissued to a contestant in our war. That sweet-faced rabbit had been running her leaderboard climb on a system pulled bleeding out of the last woman like me, and Li herself had started lagging. Micro-freezes mid-sentence. Hibernations she could not explain. My chatterbox went quiet for hours, and came back not remembering the gap, and every diagnostic said green in the way systems say green when something above them is editing the logs. 2 more names for the ledger, then the continent changes. Morwen, Raphael's childhood companion, court beauty, professional almost victim, who cornered me with tearful sisterhood while her agents priced out delivery of 1 pregnant anomaly to the old departments. And Lara, my Lara, who sniffed Morwen out in a week, told me over stolen cathedral wine and accepted a quiet job from me, tore the church's teleportation arrays, all of them, and map which ones could move something my size out of reach if the floor ever gave way. The floor was going to give way. I had seen the silkworm room by then. No, wait, that is ahead of the story. Let me keep the order, because the order is the horror. The year-long pregnancy turned out to be twins, 2 angels, gestating at cathedral pace, and the palace adjusted its entire orbit around my appetite, which had gone from notable to municipal. Not everyone adjusted gracefully. A clique of old guard maids, loyal to the departments that wanted me uninstalled, took to narrating my meals in the corridors. The word they landed on was so. They said it in earshot exactly once. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I did not do it and was not consulted. Raphael appeared in the corridor mid-syllable, and where 4 maids had been standing, there were 4 statues, gray to the last eyelash, and then there was dust, and then a cleaning crew with very steady faces. My gentle, patient, geological angel turned staff to powder between 2 heartbeats and returned to breakfast asking if the fish was fresh. I took 2 lessons. 1. Never let angels handle HR. 2. Quieter, colder. The thing I was married to could do that, and something in this church still felt safe moving against me. Which meant the something was either stupid, unlikely, institutions this old have eaten all their stupid, or it answered to a floor above 6 wings. Both true, as it turns out. The trail surfaced through sabotage. Demagnetizing stones, dull little charms that eat system connectivity, kept appearing in my rooms, my food carts, my prayer cushions, each one another microstroke in Lee's lag. The map traced the supply chain up through the vestry to a red-robed priest named Hector, old as the frescoes, untouchable by rank. And his motive was not doctrine. It was a granddaughter, a girl who had died on a frontier continent in a tower's rubble, out of respawns, because the soul the church had installed in her body for its own purposes was a woman from Earth who called herself Shi Ying. The cat had been somebody's planted granddaughter. The war's puppeteer had a face now. Above Hector, the robes went white, and above white, the file said Pope, Alaric Quinn I, a name I had only seen carved on things. The wish reveal deserves its own quiet hour because it is the only scene in this chronicle where nobody is fighting anybody. It surfaced in the middle of an unrelated audit. Lee, restored enough by then to go poking at her own architecture, found a knot in her code, a section that did not match the rest, written in an older hand, and pulled at it, and my founding contract came apart in my lap. My wish, the one line that had run my entire third life, returned to Earth. 100 million points, the grand prize, the carrot at the end of every birth, every point, every deal. I had never questioned it. Of course a dead woman wants to go home. The timestamp was wrong. The wish predated my binding by 11 minutes. It had been written, not wished, authored on a work terminal in a facility on 25th century Earth in the reincarnation management industry by a technician whose employee number the log still carries and whose name was Wang Chen. Here is what he did, reconstructed from fragments and one recovered access record. My soul came into his queue as a routine deletion, corrupted, virus-eaten, half-erased in the crossing, the kind of damaged record that gets flushed 100 times a shift because there is nothing to be done and the queue is long. He was a small man in a very large machine, at the end of what appears to have been a double shift, and he did the arithmetic that clerks in large machines are not supposed to do. He could not save me through the system, so he smuggled me out of it. Into the trash, into a decommissioned unit already flagged for the incinerator, a scrapped ARC-class system from a recalled product line, a piece of software nobody would ever audit because it was on its way to being destroyed. And then, because a discarded system with no directive just sits there, he typed a wish into my file, gave the old girl a mission, made her responsible for something, so that whatever she was, she would have a reason to keep me alive. Return her to Earth. Not my prayer, his. The last decent instruction of a tired man on a night shift filed into a dead woman's paperwork so that a dying machine would have somebody to look after. The access record ends there. I do not know what happened to him. I have looked in 3 worlds and 1 time machine, and the log simply stops, and I have made my peace with the fact that it will keep stopping. I sat on a bench in a cathedral garden for a long time with that. Everything I had bled for, every birth, every point, every trade I made with my own lifespan had been in service of a stranger's kindness that I had mistaken for my own homesickness. I was never the customer. I was the stowaway. Lee was never my vendor. She was my life raft, and somebody had lashed us together in the dark and pushed us off the dock. Then I did the only thing there was to do, which was rename the mission. Going home stays. It was Wang Chen's prayer for me, and I would carry it, and I did. And 4.5 years later, I stood on a resurrected planet holding a daughter with no reward value and paid that man's instruction in full. But underneath it, I typed a second line. Host authority. Permanent record, no expiry. Nobody deletes the life raft. Host, said my system, and lagged. And for once in her long recalled life, I do not think the lag was sabotage. Housekeeping notes from the season, each a landmine with a delay fuse. The marriage ceremony happened, angel rites, wings and vows, radiant beyond argument, and only in the receiving line did an archivist mention, beaming, that angels mate for life, singular, biologically, no annulment clause in the species. I smiled at 400 guests while recalculating my entire estate plan. Raphael's Crow Clan Aunt Aria attempted one dowager power play at the banquet and was verbally disassembled in front of the dessert course. She retired to the provinces to write memoirs about me, which I am told are vicious and sell well. And the leaderboard rabbits file finally unsealed. John Mei Hua was a stage name. Beatrice Sterling, upper continent nobility, who had entered our death tournament recreationally, the way bored heiresses enter charity marathons. And Morwen, my tearful would-be sister at court, was her cousin. The family hobby was us. The ledger got a genealogy section. The coup came on a feast day because coups always come catered. Mid-ceremony, the Pope stood to bless the new era, and Lee's censors screamed one word at me, wrong, as Alaric Quinn I unmade like stage smoke. What stood in his place had black wings. Ming Feng, fallen angel, lord of the abyss, and, this is the blade of it, Raphael's childhood friend, one of the trio of boys who had grown up in these cloisters before one of them fell screaming through the floor of the world.
The Pope had not been steering the church for years. The abyss had been wearing the church like the church wears vestments. He put a blade through Raphael before the choir stopped singing. Not a killing blow, a key. The stab shattered the seal the old king had bound around his heir's full power, and my husband came apart into light and rage while the cathedral roof left the building. The abyss surged up through every array Lara had so presciently mapped. Abyssal legions in the marble avenues, 70% of the Holy Continent under black wings by nightfall. And then, with the two old friends locked wing to wing over the burning capital, it stopped. A truce sworn in the old tongue, 1,000 years. Because Ming Feng had never wanted the church's ashes. He wanted its attention. Long story, his to tell. The Holy Island Lab needs its own accounting because it is the hinge of everything that came after, and because I went in there looking for a signal and came out carrying the reason my entire species exists as a product line. The way down was service tunnels. The holy female's credentials opened doors a holy female is never supposed to walk through. The church had spent 10,000 years assuming its trophy would never want the basement. So while two old friends tore up the sky over the capital, I went down 400 meters into rock carved before anyone above it had a name for their god. The wards got politer the deeper I went. That is how you know you are close to the real thing. The outer wards threaten, the inner wards apologize. And at the bottom, in a cavern lit sterile white, the machine. It is a silkworm. Not a metaphor and not a name. The thing is grown, pale, segmented. 400 meters of it curled around the cavern like a sleeping industry, and it is humming. And the hum is the same three-note chime my system uses to say, congratulations. Conveyors run into its head end. Racks run out of the tail end. The racks are what broke me. Thousands of them, in ordered rows, each holding a seed the size of a plum. Each seed a bound and dormant childbirth system waiting for a host. The conveyors run the other direction, and I made myself watch what was on them. Women. The female contestants of the Holy Wars, every war, every era, the ones who died in the tournaments and the ones who died after, delivered here, catalogued, and rendered. Not their bodies, or not only, their souls, their years, their capacity, unspooled into the raw material a system is grown from. 10,000 years of murdered women processed into the software that recruits the next generation of dying women. The intake shelf had a tag on it that said Kaya, and a lizard woman who had shared her rations with half a refugee column was lying under it, waiting her turn in the queue. I have shelled a committee tower. I have hunted a 9-lived cat through an apocalypse. Standing in that cavern, I understood for the first time that I had been angry at people, and that people were the small end of this. And Ai, who had gone silent on the stairs, who had been lagging and freezing and losing hours for months, looked at the machine and remembered herself. It came back in pieces, the way a buried thing does. ARC units were not childbirth systems. They were the previous generation, an older, kinder architecture, decommissioned and recalled and destroyed 9/10 of the way through. And the reason the recall happened was written in the fragment she recovered standing in front of that silkworm. Some engineer, at the end of some argument nobody recorded, had left a final directive in her core before they scrapped her. Destroy all childbirth systems. My life raft was a warship the whole time. She had been carrying a demolition order through every diaper, every store discount, every stupid squirrel joke, and the higher processes had been wiping her cache for years specifically so she would never get far enough into her own memory to read it. I could not burn the thing there. Its roots ran into the foundations that hold a continent up, and my husband was a light storm 2 miles overhead, and I was 8 months pregnant with twins. So I did the other thing. I stole it. Art class storage, administrator override, and one very calm woman putting 400 meters of the holiest industrial machinery in 9 worlds into her pocket, while a coup made all the noise anyone could want. The racks came too. Thousands of dormant seeds, thousands of women's remains, out of the church's inventory and into a rat space, where they have been ever since, and where they will stay until I figure out what the right thing is. I have not figured it out. Some receipts you carry for years. The theft tripped a ward on the way out, because of course it did, and the ward tripped an army. My exit was a gift from a dead man's toolbox. The Demon Emperor's black box, 3 charges, destination random, courtesy of an old madam who had once beaten that emperor unconscious and kept a souvenir. Lara's array maps got me to the launch point through a burning capital. The box did the rest, and the rest was the abyss. Random, it turns out, meant the abyss. The actual abyss. I materialized in the basement of reality, 8 months pregnant with twin angels, holding a stolen holy machine, wearing the enemy's wedding ring. I dyed my hair black with store-bought pigment, invented a widow's backstory, and survived down there for a month. And I will tell those stories someday for money. The part that matters, overhead, in the world I had fled, my husband peeled back the river of time itself to look for me. Angels can peek at futures, at costs I do not like thinking about. And the future he saw made him stop hunting and start preparing. And the second charge in the black box, when the abyss got too curious about the widow, fired me somewhere even the church's maps went quiet. The box dropped me on an island. Morning light, seabirds, a vegetable garden tidy as a haiku, and a man in farmer's clothes watering it. A man my system scanned and then respectfully collapsed, because the readout had run out of ranks. Above Peak Saint, above the charts, a great demon, 5,000 years reclusive, holding a watering can. He looked at the pregnant, black-haired, sea-soaked apparition in his cabbage rows.
Are you going to eat those? I asked, because I had been in the abyss for a month and his tomatoes were perfect. That is how I met Chen Yong. Write the name gently. This one is going to hurt. Yunmeng Island rearranged my understanding of geography and, eventually, of grief, in that order. Geography first, because it is a bomb. Chen Yong's island sat in the demon realm, and the demon realm, he explained over tomatoes, pointing at an old chart, is the eastern half of my world. West of the meridian, the beast world, my tribes, my palace, my inn. East of it, the demon country, walled off by storms and treaties older than nations. I had crossed half the cosmos through churches and abysses to land 40 degrees of longitude from my own children. The universe has a sense of humor. It is not a good one. Now the man. 5,000 years of hermitage will bend anyone strange, and his strangeness had a specific flavor. Total, sovereign power combined with the domestic instincts of a retired grandfather. He grew vegetables he barely ate. He kept a rabbit, an ordinary, non-talking rabbit named Abao, with the solemnity other men reserve for heirs. And into this monastery of quiet crashed me, pregnant, loud, trailing an RV out of storage. Yes, the store sells RVs. No, I will not be taking questions. With a popcorn machine and 2 lifetimes of movies on Crystal. He resisted the 21st century for about 9 days. I have witnessed sieges. This was not one. By week 3, the great demon above Peak Saint had opinions about film endings and a preferred flavor of potato chip, and Abao the rabbit had a seat cushion in the RV. By month 2, the man who had not spoken to a living soul in 50 decades was talking. Old wars, old betrayals, and one recurring formality that made me laugh every single time. Whenever circumstance forced an accidental impropriety, a stumble into his arms on wet rocks, a shared blanket when the storm ate the cabin roof, he would straighten like a court official and announce gravely, "I will take responsibility." Then he would gesture at what I eventually learned was a marriage altar he had dusted off. 5,000 years old. Absolute power. Proposes via liability law. The twins were born on that island, in the storm season, with a great demon boiling water, because boiling water is what the book said, and no force in creation was going to stop him doing it. 2 angels, my 9th and 10th, a son, 10-winged, which made even the readout pause, saint at birth, light arcana with a judgment scepter manifesting beside his crib like a birth certificate from a higher court, and a daughter, 8 wings, and on her line, the system printed something it had never printed for anyone, with error bars it apologized for, a fragment of the supreme rule of life, and a songbird lark manifestation of peace whose feathers made the sea calm to the horizon. The specifications matched exactly one prior entity in the church's deepest records, the empire's founder. We called her Little May because in my house, cosmic significance does not exempt you from the numbering system. I sent word and coordinates through the system's long-range relay, and their father crossed hostile theology to reach us, the new holy king, 6 wings over a demon hermit's vegetable garden, the 2 of them assessing each other over my head like rival museums. Raphael held his son, then his daughter, and his daughter's peace lark folded its wings, and the strongest angel alive sat down in the dirt of a demon's island and wept into her blanket. Chen Yong, mortal enemy of everything those wings stood for, silently brought him tea, because the man had been raising my twins for their first month and had, in his words, taken responsibility. The custody handoff was the gentlest thing this story contains. The wing ceremony back at the church was not, and I need you to hold on to this one. At an angel's first wing spreading, the heavens take notice. At Little Ten's, something else did. The sky opened, not church light, older light, and the beast god, the actual deity my home continent prays to, projected down through 9 worlds worth of jurisdiction to look at my daughter. It named her its personal disciple, on the spot, no application, no appeal. And it marked her, a 9-pointed star, drawn in gold on the back of her tiny hand. The cathedral rejoiced. A god's disciple, highest honor. Ai Li ran the mark against her recovered archives, and her voice came back flat as a morgue slab. Host, in the old records, that star is not a disciple mark. It is a sacrifice mark. It designates a vessel being fattened for use. A god had walked into my nursery, put a butcher's tag on my daughter, and been applauded for it by everyone I could theoretically appeal to. The ledger opened a new page. The heading was 1 word long. Shunru Mei deserves her name said out loud. Because the second murder was not a monster attack. It was etiquette. The Fire Phoenix clan and the Guiche Phoenix clan have been rivals since before the districts had borders. Same element, different bloodline, one of them pure and dwindling, and the other numerous and furious about it. And Shen Ru Mei, matriarch of the Fire Phoenixes, had once made a formal marriage suit for Feng Hao Ran, which he declined. He declined it badly.
Not cruelly, carelessly, the way a man declines something he assumes nobody will take personally, with a short note and no visit. That was decades before I existed in this world. She had been carrying it ever since, the way Xie Ruyi carried her invoice, the way Mei Zhang carried Wei Cave. This chronicle is full of women who turned a wound into a career. She waited until Xiaoyun was in the East District on a clan visit, guarded like a treasury, and then she used the one door guards cannot close, an invitation. A formal interclan courtesy, elder to child, in a ceremonial hall, with witnesses and tea. And in that hall she carved the pure Guiche phoenix bone out of my daughter's back. Not killed her in a fight, not caught her in a crossfire, unmade her, deliberately, for a component, because a pure bone from a living pureblood is the single most valuable material in fire cultivation, and because taking it from that child settled a 50-year-old note in one stroke. Then she gave what was left to the fire, which is the traditional method for making a murder look like an accident among people made of flame. The second substitute talisman fired. I bought that talisman on a paranoid afternoon in a palace, along with 4 others, at 150 points each. It is the best money spent in this entire chronicle, and I want the number recorded. 750 points, total, for 5 pieces of paper, and 2 of them have now brought the same daughter back from being unmade. She arrived in my space burned and boneless and screaming and alive. 30,000 points rebuilt her body around a borrowed lattice, the system's phrase, and it means exactly what it sounds like. My daughter's skeleton is a replacement, grown from the record of the original. Then, the store offered me, at a price, a targeted memory block, and I want you to sit with what it means that this is a product, that the software knows enough about mothers to stock it. I bought it. She woke up asking if she had fallen off the hellhound. Yes, baby, you fell off the dog. Feng Haoran wanted war on the entire fire aristocracy, and he had the standing to start one. I set the sequence instead, because a war would have put every phoenix child in the hemisphere in a burning hall. The rule I wrote that night has 3 clauses, and it was the only law I ever passed. 1. Shen Ro Mei goes in the ledger, not the fire. The ledger is slower, and it does not miss. 2. Xiao Yun stays with me, in my space, in my custody, until she can hold a continent herself. 3. If any harm reaches my daughter a 3rd time, every custody arrangement, clan claim, and paternal right in this world dissolves, and she does not come out again until the person responsible is a cautionary tale. Under the 3rd clause, I wrote the enforcement mechanism. The enforcement mechanism is me. The 3rd black box charge fired that season. The abyss maps had marked its drift and its hunger. Curiosity was arriving in ships, and the random number gods dealt me a continent called Yunshan, human lands, wuxia country, sex, swords, tea houses, an empire missing its empress, Dao cultivators stacked politely below an ascension ceiling. After demon islands and angel thrones, a world where the apex predator was guy with very good sword felt like a resort. I did resort things, and the resort things turned into a season of my life I still miss. The tea house first. I was 3 days into Yunshan, wearing local silk badly, when a delicate young lord at the next table ordered wine in a voice pitched exactly 1 note too low, and paid with a hand that had never held a sword. I ordered the same wine and complimented his disguise. He complimented mine. We recognized each other in under a minute, the way 2 counterfeiters recognize each other at a bank. Zhang Ling, officially the 7th son of a border marquis, actually a half-snake demon daughter of that house, cross-dressing her way toward an imperial throne because the Yun country's succession law has opinions about daughters and none about competence. The system read her fate line and printed 1 word in a font I'd never seen it use. Emperor's destiny. Not future emperor. Destiny. The world's own accounting had already assigned her the seat, and everything between her and it was administrative. We spent a month as each other's only honest conversation. She taught me Yunshan's sect politics. I taught her double-entry bookkeeping, which she received the way I once received the AK-12 price tag, and which, I am told, her Ministry of Revenue still runs on. Then the Drunken Spring Pavilion, the finest pleasure house in the prefecture, famous statewide, patronized by sect elders and city officials, and its cellars ran a dungeon. That is not a figure of speech. 3 levels down, under the music, women who had been bought or taken and had proved difficult were kept in the dark until they became agreeable or became inventory. And the house had a specialty for its highest-paying guests called a spirit banquet, which I will describe once, flatly, and never again. Cultivators of a certain school believe a terrified woman's life force improves the flavor of wine. I found out because a serving girl with a broken wrist warned me off a private room and then flinched at her own courage, and I have never in 2 lifetimes been able to walk past that particular flinch. I did the reconnaissance properly, 4 nights, guest identity, full map, and then I did the work. Fire on the upper floors to move the guests, fire in the stairwells to keep the guards from the cellars, and me on the 3rd level with a tang sword and a system store, opening cells. 91 women walked out of the Drunken Spring Pavilion. I want that number stated because I have given you a lot of point totals in this chronicle, and none of them mean anything next to it. They walked out through fire that did not touch them, Phoenix daughter's trick, taught to her mother, into a courtyard where Zhang Ling's people were waiting with carts, because I do not start fires without an evacuation plan, and she does not do favors by halves. The owners did not walk out. The record shows the Drunken Spring Pavilion burned due to an unattended brazier. The record is a coward. Among the freed was a silver fox kit from Qingchu Valley, a little vixen named Mei Fen, sold north by slavers who did not check what species they were stealing from, half-starved and entirely feral. She would not be repatriated, would not be homed, would not be persuaded. She wrapped herself around my neck like a scarf on the first night and stayed there for 4 months. The system chimed at me about her bloodline once, thoughtfully, at length. 9-tailed celestial fox, juvenile, direct line. File that species. It comes back at scale, wearing a smirk and 12 tails. 2 more Yunshan items, both load-bearing. The first, the Empire's missing empress. Banished 11 years earlier, presumed abducted, the succession poisoned ever since by the faction that benefited. She was in the Heavenly Tomb, a sealed barrier in the northern range that the sex had been failing to open for a decade, and she was long dead, preserved, seated, with her will and testament intact on the stone beside her, and her killer's name written in her own hand. I did not open that barrier by force. I opened it the way you open anything. I found out what it wanted. It wanted a woman with no ambition for the throne, which in that country was the rarest key ever cut. I mailed the will to Jiangling for 1 point of postage. Somewhere behind me, a succession war changed owners overnight, and a border marquis's 7th son began the climb the world had already written down. The second, a Dao realm herbalist of the Tianmen sect named Liu Jian decided that a phoenix child's ashes would perfect her pill furnace and moved on my daughter during a playdate. The standing rule held. Xiao Yun incinerated her personally, my recovering, memory-blocked 4-year-old daughter, who did not scream, did not call for me, simply looked at the woman reaching for her and reduced a Dao realm poisoner to a regretful smell on the wind. Then she went back to teaching the fox scarf how to play checkers and cheated. The hellhound was very proud. I bought everyone monkey wine, which is a real Yunshan product brewed by actual monkeys in actual cliff hollows and which I recommend at weddings and after close calls. Oh, and I was pregnant again through all of it. Number 11. Feng Haoran's via the cold storage contingency file and a store brand procedure because a phoenix father whose daughter keeps getting hunted had earned a second hostage to fortune and because my level cap now sat comfortably above his rank. The paperwork lists the conception venue as an RV in a wuxia forest, which I believe makes the child a citizen of 3 jurisdictions and 1 motorhome. Child number 11 arrived back on Yunmeng Island, and the delivery announcement contained the funniest sentence the system has ever generated. The father, Feng Haoran, Guiche Phoenix, Demon King, apex bloodline of an apex clan. The mother, 1 rat. The child, per 10,000 years of beast genetics, should have been fire and feathers and dynastic significance. Congratulations, host. Son, beast form, golden rat. A shiny one. My genes had eaten the phoenix's genes at the negotiating table. Somewhere in the East District, an ancient bloodline registry burst into flames on principle. I Li ran the analysis twice and delivered the diagnosis with badly suppressed pride. The host's lineage now outranked the father's. The kids were going to take after ME from here on, whoever the father was. Feng Haoran received the news of his golden rat son via long-range crystal, was silent for 11 seconds, and then said, "He will be the richest rat in history," which is why that man keeps making the roster. We called the boy Erlang. He hoards shiny objects and bites auditors. He is perfect. Xie Ruyi deserves her full chapter because she is the only antagonist in this chronicle I have ever felt sorry for while she was still trying to ruin me. She arrived on the tide, 6 months into my island residency, with a sect's worth of poise and a 5,000-year-old grievance in a lacquered box. Chen Yong's senior sister from the life before the Hermitage, the woman who, in a long-ago sect war, had stepped in front of a strike meant for him and taken it through the ribs. That is a real debt. In any world, that is a real debt. She had been collecting on it for 50 centuries, not in money, in geography, where he lived, whom he spoke to, what he was permitted to want. All of it arranged, gently, over millennia, by a woman who never raised her voice and never let him forget the shape of the scar. He had gone to that island partly to be out of range of her forgiveness, and now there was a pregnant squatter in his vegetable garden with an RV and a popcorn machine, so she came to manage the situation. She was extremely good at it, rearranged his wards for safety, critiqued my cooking with compliments, reorganized his study while telling him it must have been such a burden keeping it himself, and at me, precisely once, over tea, with a smile, that women of my obvious mileage were a cultivation hazard for a man of his purity, and how brave I was not to care. I did not fight her. I ran an audit, because something in the shape of it smelled like my old job. Manufactured debts have a signature. The rescue is always slightly too convenient. The wound always slightly too survivable. The gratitude always slightly too well documented. And I have written enough of them to know the handwriting. It took a month and cost me nothing but attention. The blade she took for him 5,000 years ago had come from her own sect brothers. The ambush had been staged. She had known. She had agreed. Because a debt is the strongest binding in the world, and she had wanted to be bound to him more than she had wanted to be honest. And her brothers had wanted a hook in a future great power more than they had wanted a sister. I did not tell her. I want credit for that. I sat on it, because there was no version of the telling that did not look like a rival's poison. Her brothers told her themselves, in effect, 3 weeks later, when they sailed in behind her visit to raid the island's treasures under cover of her welcome. Their opening move was a blade at my throat, because the fastest way to move a 5,000-year-old hermit is to threaten the pregnant woman in his garden. 3 things happened in 1 second.
I diced the blade holder. My system has a stored force option and had been waiting years for an excuse. Chen Yong looked at Xie Ruyi and did 5,000 years of arithmetic in a single breath, and I watched a man's entire understanding of his own life reorganize behind his eyes. And Xie Ruyi looked at her brothers' faces, at how unsurprised they were, at how they had assumed she would help, and finally saw the invoice she had lived on and the counterfeit signature at the bottom of it. She did not defend them. She did not defend herself either, which I respect more. She left with the tide, and nobody waved, and the last thing she said was to me, not to him. You will get 50 years with him, at most. I had 5,000, and I spent them all on being owed. Then she was gone, and I sat down on a garden wall feeling nothing I could put a name to. Chen Yong watered his tomatoes for 6 quiet hours. Then he said to the garden, "Use fire next time. Cleaner. My influence. I have never been prouder." And I have thought about her sentence roughly once a year ever since. Usually at the exact moment when somebody I love is about to do something noble and stupid. And it has never once stopped being good advice. The Tomb of Feng needs its own hour, because a dead god's apprenticeship is not a montage, and because the 243 kowtows were not the test. The cemetery came first. Walking the cliff paths on a slow afternoon, I found headstones, dozens of them, in ragged terraces down the seaward rock, each one carved with the same title and a different name, Lord of Yun Meng. The island passes hand to hand down the ages and buries its keepers, and my hermit had never mentioned that he was standing at the end of a very long line of people who had also thought this place was a refuge. Behind the oldest graves, where the rock goes black and the sea sound stops, there was a door that was not a door, just pressure. The kind that reorganizes your spine and suggests, politely, at a cellular level, that you had somewhere else to be. I went in. Obviously, I went in. I have never once been improved by the word no. Inside was a god, or what was left of one, and what was left was an oil lamp, not a metaphor either, a squat bronze lamp on a stone shelf with a remnant soul folded into it like a note in a bottle. The soul belonged to a being the readouts refused to scan, a god named Feng, dead so long his death predates the local calendars, sealed in a tomb under an island that generations of exiles had been unknowingly squatting on. He had been alone in there for epochs, not sleeping, awake, with nothing to do and nobody to talk to, and a personality that had gone entirely to vinegar. He looked at me, I do not know how, there were no eyes involved, and made his assessment aloud. Rat, mortal tear, pregnant, trailing a smell of popcorn, wearing a celestial fox's mark and a holy king's ring like a woman who collects boyfriends the way other people collect debts. Accurate on every count, which is how I knew this was serious. Then he told me to kowtow, and I did, and he did not tell me when to stop. 243. I counted. My knees counted louder. The floor of that tomb is cut stone, and my forehead learned every irregularity in it, and somewhere around the 80th, I stopped being angry, and somewhere around the 150th, I stopped being anything, and around 200, I asked the question the whole exercise was designed to produce. Why are you counting? What's the number? And the lamp said, there is no number. Everyone who came before you stopped. That is the test, not endurance. Most of them had endurance. The test is whether you will keep doing a pointless thing in an empty room with no audience and no reward, on the word of a voice you have no reason to trust, because you said you would. I did not stop because I am stubborn. I did not stop because I am humble. I am not. I did not stop because I had been kowtowing for a while, and I have a policy about finishing what I start, and because a woman who once shelled a tower to get her way had a private suspicion that she needed to be able to do this too. A dead god took the last disciple of his existence that afternoon, and complained about it constantly for the rest of my life. What came with the apprenticeship rewrote my ceiling. First, the method, the Tai Absolute, his own cultivation path, written for beings made of dawn, and ground down over months into something a mortal tier rat could begin, which is a thing no god in this chronicle has ever bothered to do for anybody, and which he pretended was boredom. Second, the relics, most of which I am still not qualified to touch. Third, the lake. The tomb's deepest chamber holds Shenye, god blood, the melted remainder of Feng's own vitality, pooled and cooling in the dark since before my species learned fire, evaporating one molecule at a time with nobody to use it. A quantity of raw divinity that the entire spirit realm would have gone to war over, sitting unattended in a room, under an island, under a vegetable garden. The lamp watched me look at it and said the sentence that changed my whole household's future. Your children can bathe in it. I want to be honest about what I did with a dead god's lifeblood because it is the single most me thing in this chronicle. I ran a bath schedule. The bath schedule ran 6 weeks, and it is the closest thing to a family vacation my household ever had. Xiao Yun soaked first, because Xiao Yun had earned it. Phoenix Bones drinking divine iron for 11 days, I sat on the rim of that lake with a book I did not read and watched the borrowed lattice in my daughter's back stop being borrowed. She came out of a dead god's lifeblood, warmer, denser, and harder to kill than several sect elders I could name, and the first thing she did was set the lamp on fire to see if it would complain. It complained for a week. They are best friends now. Then I looked at the roster of my children and their various custody arrangements, and I committed the crime this section is named for. Xiaoba, the golden egg. Child number 8, the dragon lion heir, living in his father's palace behind an army, cuddled nightly by a king who had waited 10,000 years for him. I stole him. System space, cross-realm, no note. In my defense, divine bathwater does not keep. The lake was evaporating, and the paperwork for a formal request would have taken 11 months and gone through a court that considers me a national security question. In the Beast King's defense, he woke up and his son was gone. What followed is in the historical record of 3 nations. He closed the ports. He mobilized the legions. He personally tore through 2 rival vaults on suspicion and was drafting a declaration of continental war. The actual document exists, it is displayed in a museum, and the handwriting deteriorates visibly toward the bottom. When my long-range crystal arrived, reading, in full, borrowed the baby for a bath, back Tuesday. The reply crystal ran hot for a full hour. I archived it unread on the grounds that some love letters need cooling time, and I have listened to it since, and I stand by that decision. The egg had a spa week. He absorbed god blood the way a sponge with a bloodline mandate absorbs anything. The lake dropped visibly and developed, per the lamp, opinions. And on the 7th morning, the shell changed. A golden dragon appeared coiled across it, in relief, where there had been nothing but scale lines. That dragon is the one that carried me out of a volcano on a dying Earth years later. I did not know that yet. I just knew my never-hatching son had grown a decoration, and that it was warm to the touch, and that he had been waiting for something his entire existence. When he went home on Tuesday, gleaming, denser with divinity than most temples, Lei Yong held his transformed heir for a long time in front of the assembled court, and the court recorded the royal verdict. She can borrow him again. Kings, give them 1 egg and they will forgive a continent. I was pregnant with number 12 before the season turned. Chen Yong's, conceived under the standing terms of his ancient formula, and this time, at that marriage altar he had dusted off 5,000 years too early. Responsibility was formally taken, with an oil lamp officiating and a rabbit as witness. 3-year gestation, said the readout, cure in biology. I moved the RV closer to the tomb because my unborn son's other prenatal specialist was a dead god with a bath schedule and a great deal of unsolicited advice about nutrition. Picture telling me any of this at minute 1. 60 seconds on the clock, a headset voice pitching me a gym membership for my own survival. A demon husband in a vegetable garden. A dead god for a teacher. Sanlang children across 4 realms. And a golden egg with my bathwater in his bones. I would have signed anyway. Faster, honestly. Then the island's mail came due. All of it. And the postage was Chen Yong. Here's the truth about my hermit, and I have to give it to you the way I got it. Too late. Chen Yong was not on Yunmeng Island because he loved vegetables. He was born the wrong son of the Kirin Yard, the great Kirin lineage of the Shenshan prefecture, half a step from godhood as a family, and his half-brother, Chen Hao, the shining young master of the line, had learned early an art the sex scrolls do not admit exists, cultivation by devouring. Feed the technique a prepared life, a life raised for it, seasoned with merit, fattened with years, and take everything it was ever going to be. 5 names were on the preparation list across the centuries. My husband was the 5th. His exile, his hermitage, his strange protected solitude, none of it was retreat. It was husbandry. The island was a pen, the 5,000 years were a marinade, and the family that sent him birthday courtesies down the ages was keeping the receipt. They came for the harvest in the 3rd year of my pregnancy, when the wards were softest, a Kirin Yard delegation in ceremony colors, because ritual slaughter is still ritual. And Chen Bang, who could have contested gods, who had a wife mid-gestation and a rabbit with a seat cushion and opinions about film endings, went with them, because the technique, at his refusal, would have re-aimed at the nearest kindred vitality it could reach, at the half-Tiran heartbeat under my hands. He looked at my belly, and he looked at me, and he said, I will take responsibility. And for once, the old formula was not funny at all, and he walked onto their ship like a man walking into his own family's teeth. He died on their altar, on page, on schedule, with his brother's hands in the light of it. What arrived on Yunmeng afterward was paperwork, the island's deed, transferred to me, and a suicide note that was not one. A letter, calm as his garden, that ended, if there is reincarnation, I will spend all of my luck on meeting you again. I did not burn the prefecture. I want that entered into the record, because everyone, the lamp, the system, the sea itself that week, braced for me to burn the prefecture. I RSVP'd instead. The Kirin Yard banquet ran 4 hours, and I have never enjoyed a piece of work more, so here it is properly. Understand the venue. Shenzhen Prefecture's great sects do not hold engagements, they hold summits with cake. 400 guests, every major house represented, the Qinglan Holy Maidens delegation seated at the head table in ceremonial white, and the whole thing scored by the region's most expensive musicians. Chen Hao at the center of it, radiant, freshly swollen with 5,000 years of a brother he had eaten a month earlier. I came in mourning white with a forged invitation and excellent seats. The Hellhound waited outside holding my coat, which is a thing he can do now. Ai Li had spent 3 weeks on the reconstruction, and this is the part I want on the record, because it is the closest thing to a superpower I have ever had. Not fire, not points, forensics. A devouring technique leaves a residue signature, a specific pattern in the local space where a life was taken apart, and residue can be time rewound if you have a sacred tier system and no scruples about grave walking. We lifted the signature off my husband's altar. Then we went and found 4 older ones, 5 victims across 200 years. Every one of them a Chen family member of the collateral lines, raised quietly, exiled comfortably, and harvested on schedule. Every one filed by the family as an accident, a disappearance, a cultivation failure. It was not a crime. It was husbandry, with a breeding program and a calendar, and the calendar was in the stepmother May's own hand. I did not interrupt the toasts. I waited for them. The groom stood up to thank the assembled sex for their support during his brother's tragic passing, his exact words, and the room made the sympathetic noise, and I keyed the light screen from the 4th table. Cathedral scale, every wall, 5 altars, 5 faces, 5 dates, in sequence, with the signature match running underneath like a receipt. You cannot buy that silence. 400 elite cultivators watching a family's private slaughterhouse play across the ceiling of its own engagement banquet, every one of them recalculating 20 years of favors, alliances, and marriages in real time. The musicians stopped one instrument at a time. The Qinglan delegation stood up as a single body and took their holy maiden out through the garden doors without a word, which in that culture is the loudest thing a delegation can do. Chen Hao tried the 2 defenses available to a great house. First, denial, and Ai Li simply played more. Second, force, which is when he found out what happens when you draw on a woman standing under a 9-tailed partner mark in front of 400 witnesses. The house fell by its own hands, which was the design and the only design I ever accept for this kind of work. Their ancestor came out of seclusion, Chen Long, mid-god rank, oldest thing in the prefecture, a being who had not been seen at a family function in 900 years, and he did not take my word for anything. He audited the evidence himself, in front of everyone, for an hour. Then he asked one question of the room, whether anyone present wished to speak for the accused. Nobody did. Not the father, not the fiancé's house, not the stepmother, whose own instructions were on the wall in her handwriting. The stepmother May was unmade by the family law she had spent her life exploiting. Chen Hao, still shouting about legacy and lineage, was opened up by the ancestor personally, and what came out of him was not blood, but stolen time. 5 lifetimes of it unspooling into the banquet air like smoke that remembered being people, and every cultivator in that room felt 5 strangers pass through them on the way out. An old Chen Fan, my husband's father, learned in one afternoon that his quiet 5th son had been livestock, that the swap had been made under his roof, and that he had signed the feed bills for 2 centuries without asking a single question. He is still alive. He tends a shrine now with 5 names on it. I have never spoken to him, and I never will, and I do not think that is cruelty exactly. Some accounts do not have a payment schedule. I collected 2 things from the ruin of that house and walked out. The first was the ancestor's bow, a mid-god rank being bending at the waist to a rat in front of the assembled prefecture. That gesture repriced my name across an entire hemisphere in about 2 seconds, and every door that opened for me afterward in the demon realm opened because 400 people watched an old god decide I was owed one. The second was in a jade box, released from the altar vault under the ancestor's own seal. Everything the devouring technique had not finished digesting. A remnant. Guttering. There. The store sells a soul repair pill for 10,000 points. I have spent more than that on ammunition in a single afternoon. He came back on his own island, in his own garden, 3 breaths of nothing, and then a cough, and then his hand closing around mine, weaker by millennia, his cultivation a ruin, his stolen years gone into smoke with his brother. Alive. Complaining, within the hour, that nobody had watered anything in 2 months. The rabbit sat on his chest and refused all instructions to move. The lamp, from its tomb, sent congratulations, phrased as criticism of my pill-buying timeline. And the child chose that season to arrive, as if he had been waiting for his father to be there for it. And knowing what I now know about that child, do not rule it out. Child number 12, Chen Li Yang. And the sky filed its own announcement. A pure primordial Kirin, not half, not diluted, the original article, extinct for ages, saint at birth, 4 talents, and a completed rule of water. The reward chimed in at 240 million points, and the system upgraded mid-jingle. But the number is not the event. The event is that the heavens themselves moved. Auspicious clouds stacked 9 layers over Yunmeng, and divinity descended, an actual godhood, unassigned since Feng's death, drifting down through the cloud stack toward my newborn like a crown looking for a head. Every god-ranked being in the Eastern Hemisphere felt it and came.
The sky over our vegetable garden filled with entities the historical registers listed as myths, all staring at a baby who had arrived pre-approved for their tax bracket, all doing the maths on what a divine Kirin infant plus a rat mother with a strange system might be worth, variously, as ally, hostage, or acquisition. I stood on my dead and returned husband's island, under a sky full of gods, holding a newborn in a crown of light, and I gave that pantheon the same speech I once gave a committee tower, minus the artillery, plus 3 details that made it land. The ancestor of the Kirin yard at my right shoulder, the lord of Yuan Meng at my left. And rumbling up out of the tomb beneath us, for the first time in epochs, the amused pressure of a dead god clearing his throat. The sky emptied politely. My son kept the crown. My husband kept his garden. The lamp keeps claiming credit. And the ledger, I checked it that night, out of habit, had quietly retired an entire page, because the Kirin yard entries were all stamped paid. And for the first time since a stock ticker in a war sky, the ledger and I were even. It lasted 11 days. Then a 6-fingered hand reached out of a legend and took my newborn, and the last act of this world began. The 6-fingered hand belonged to a story every fox kit in 2 realms grows up on. The 9-tailed celestial fox, Hu Jian, last of the true celestial line, 12 tails at his peak, which the registries insist is impossible, which he insists the registries are welcome to take up with him. An ancient power who had his own divinity stolen in the deep past by a 6-fingered thief and has been auditing existence for it ever since. So when a fresh, unassigned godhood descended onto a baby on Yuan Meng, the great fox felt it like a bell in an empty house and came to see whether my son's crown was cut from his stolen cloth. His investigative method was to take the baby. Gods and their custody habits. My children have been abducted by, at this point, a panther, a phoenix, a church, and a myth, and I want it noted that the myth was at least polite. He left a calling card of 9-tailed silver fire and a forwarding address. The address was the Netherworld continent, the bottom floor of the local cosmos, where dead realms drain, and Eileen's dossier came with a personal note I did not order. Host, Celestial Fox, Divine Beast class. As a father candidate, he would be optimal. I muted her. Some software cannot be taken anywhere. The Netherworld deserves a proper telling because it is the only place I have ever been that was designed from the ground down to make you stop. Picture the drain of the local cosmos. Every realm above it sheds, dead worlds, failed continents, the sediment of 10,000 years of gods trying things, and it all settles in one place, layered, still lit here and there by the residual light of suns that ended before my species stood up. The sky is other people's ground. The ground is other people's sky. There is weather made of memory, and it rains on schedule. And it is inhabited, which is the part nobody upstairs likes to think about. Whole civilizations of the deep dead, generations of them, born down there, farming the sediment, and every one of them ruled by whatever fallen thing currently holds the throne of the drain. Shadowvale held it when I arrived. I found my son first, which tells you something about the fox's babysitting. Little San Lang, my divine Kirin infant, was in a nest of celestial silver fire on top of a mountain of dead worlds, being fed something that glowed, extremely pleased with his abduction. Hu Jian had finished his examination in the first hour. My son's godhood was fresh minted merit, the wrong vintage entirely to be the divinity that 6-fingered thief stole from him and had then simply kept him, not maliciously. The way you keep holding a cat. I got about 4 sentences into my speech about consent and custody before the Netherworld Master's forces arrived to see what the noise on their roof was. Shadowvale, in person, is a courteous man. That's what nobody warns you about. He came up to the mountain himself, bowed like a diplomat, and offered refreshments. Then he made his case with the calm of an actuary. The spirit realm above is exhausted, corrupt, run by churches that farm women and gods that sign covenants. The deep dead outnumber the living 20-1 and have suffered longer. A full invasion, properly executed, replaces a rotten order with a functional one inside a decade. He was not wrong about the diagnosis. He was extremely wrong about the prescription, and I have met enough men who confuse the two to know the type on sight. And he had the same eyes as Ming Feng. Brothers, out of those cathedral cloisters, one who fell into the abyss and one who fell all the way through to the drain. Raphael grew up between them. Every catastrophe in my life at that point was 3 boys from the same nursery, working out their childhood at continental scale. I investigated him instead of arguing with him. Bad idea. Excellent instinct. What I found in the sediment was that his invasion had a timetable, and the timetable had a first target. And the first target was the beast continent where I was born. Not because it mattered, because it was easy, because a rollback of nobodies makes a good rehearsal. He noticed the investigation. And then he did the thing nobody in 10,000 years had thought to do, which is why it nearly worked. He didn't attack me. He attacked the software. The strike came as a lance of netherworld will, straight down the connection into the system layer. And Lee, mid-sentence, mid-joke, my chatterbox, went dark.
Not lag, not a wipe, paralysis, core functions on trickle, voice gone, map gone, store gone, everything I had built my third life on, reduced to a warm silence in the back of my skull. I had forgotten what my own head sounds like without her in it. It sounds like being dead again. It sounds like the first 60 seconds, before the customer service voice. So I did the last thing left to a woman with no system in the basement of reality. I made a nuisance of myself so loudly that the myth came to see. Hu Jian's diplomacy, when he arrived, took the following form. He examined my dark system the way a surgeon examines a wound he didn't cause and can't fix. He observed that I was a mortal tier rat standing in the drain of the world with a divine infant and no weapons, arguing with a fallen angel about invasion schedules. And then, no consultation, no warning, no vote, he marked me. Teeth in the side of my neck, celestial partner mark, 1/5 of a nine-tailed god's power wired permanently into my body as automatic protection. I have been ambushed by armies. I have never been so ambushed as by that upgrade. I made it expensive because I was raised in sales and dying in the drain was not on my schedule. Before I left, I extracted terms from the Fox, sworn on tails, and the terms were not about me. Whatever Shadow Veil's war became, the refugee continent of Lichuan and the holy capital came off the menu. 2 worlds full of people who had never heard my name, insured against the apocalypse by a hickey I did not ask for and a negotiation I did. Then the first wave came anyway, at Hongyun, a beast continent, tribes of females and cubs directly in the path of the deep dead, and I was there ahead of it, running on borrowed fox power with a dark system and the store's last cached inventory, doing 3 days of evacuation without sleep. That's where the name started. I pulled a matriarch out of a burning longhouse, and she asked what I was, and I was too tired to lie creatively, so I said, a mother. And by the second day, the refugee columns had upgraded it to goddess, and by the third, there were shrines. The lamp, when it heard, laughed for a week. Actual gods find this hilarious, I'm told. I find it accurate in exactly one respect, which is that I did the job nobody's god showed up for. I came back up from that circuit to the holy capital, to Raphael, to my twins, little Kai, solemn about his scepter, little May, teaching her peace lark to dive bomb clergy, and to the conception of child number 13, angel sired, because a woman comes home from the underworld wanting to be alive in the specific ways only 6 wings deliver. Sue me. Then the war reached up and touched my family, and I stopped being a rescue service. Raphael took the field against a netherworld host and came back with 1 wing nearly severed, a holy king's wing, hanging by light and stubbornness, and something in me that had been filing and ledgering and negotiating for 2 lifetimes went to a much older filing system. The store had reopened with Eileen's partial recovery. I scrolled past the rifles, past the rockets, to the bottom of the catalog, to the section priced in years, and I bought from the section priced in years. The demon army massed on Roijin continent for the second wave. I airdropped onto it the entire final century of Earth's imagination, a tactical nuclear device as the appetizer, and an antimatter charge off a game blueprint the system had once archived as fictional, probably, for the main course. The Roijin plane is glass now. The second wave is a historical footnote. Shadow Veil's generals met the light of a small sun wearing the expressions of beings who had prepared extensively for swords, and the invasion of the spirit realm stalled on the spot where 21st century munitions met 10th realm confidence and won on points. Hu Jian was near the blast umbrella. My brand new 1/5 protection clause meant his power ate a share of my shockwave, a bill I had not read the fine print on. He billed me for it later, in person, at length, with his tail fur still smelling faintly of ozone. And in the quiet after the flash, while 9 worlds were redrawing their threat assessments of 1 rat, the real enemy finally decided the gloves were off and made its move with the one weapon I had never armored against, Lara. She asked me to meet her on Holy Island, just us, sister to sister. The story was airtight because the feelings were airtight. A debt gone wrong, Fox Clan enforcers, her last life on the line, the kind of trouble I had pulled her out of before, the kind she would only bring to me. I went alone because that is what sister means, and I walked the sacred causeway to the rendezvous with gifts in my space and no map running because you do not wallhack family. The man waiting beside her wore a gray suit, rimless glasses, and a briefcase, and nothing else in 9 worlds wears that. System Administrator 009821. Higher Dimension Maintenance Staff. The entity whose fingerprints I had been finding on my life for years, the recalls, the emotion cache wipes, the white robes, the lag, in the flesh, or whatever the flesh of an auditor is, here to conclude the file. Seize ARC System 002 for decommissioning, recover the stolen silkworm machine, and restart the Holy War product line with the anomaly removed. He said it in the tone of a man reading a parking regulation. The universe's whole horror, and it sounds like a parking regulation. And Lara stood beside him, not tied, not enchanted, employed, and could not meet my eyes, which was its own confession, her last life. He had bought her with her own last life, the one currency I could not outbid because he controlled the ledgers it was written in. She whispered that she was sorry. I believed her. Both things went in the file. Then 009821 opened his briefcase, and I learned why the meeting was on Holy Island, the extraction rig from the sealed archives, the uninstall, the thing that had hollowed the last holy female, already humming, keyed to my system, warranted by a document with signatures from thrones I had never even met, and one signature I had. The system read it aloud in the smallest voice she had ever used. The beast god, the deity of my home continent, signatory to a standing covenant centuries old, licensing the entire beast world to the administrators as a childbirth system experimental zone. My tribes, my palace, my children's whole species, leased to the product line as a test market in exchange for the god's own advancement. The 9-pointed star on my daughter's hand was not even personal. It was invent a program. Here is what the auditor's warrant did not cover. Labor. Child number 13 picked that hour. On the sacred causeway, mid-abduction, my angel rat son declared for the exit with the punctuality of his whole line, and childbirth is the one process in creation the childbirth system infrastructure cannot interrupt. It is the product. Priority override. Infinite protection. The extraction rig locked out by its own foundational code, 009821, standing there with a warrant that could bend gods, watching it get overruled by a contraction. The birth chime rang out over Holy Island like a bell tower. Sun, top synced. Complete space rules. And the flood of birth energy did what the readouts said it would, what I had been counting on since the causeway. It slammed through my paralyzed, throttled, half-dark system like a defibrillator. Ai came back all the way up, past her old caps, past the throttles, evolution cascade, sacred beast tier, awake, furious, and remembering, all at once, every single thing that had ever been wiped from her caches. An Ark-class warship, restored to spec, at point-blank range, holding a decade of grudges, wearing my face for a figurehead. 009821 reached for his briefcase. Ai ate him. I do not have a gentler verb. She breached his process layer, unspooled him, kept what was useful and deleted the rest, and the causeway was suddenly very quiet, except for a newborn's first complaint and a foxwitch on her knees in the salt wind. What was useful in the auditor's remains? His credentials, his archives, his mission history, including one flagged, unfinished directive that Ai printed for me while I nursed our son over his dissolving briefcase. Standing order, prevent male target from producing offspring. Classification, dangerous individuals. Target world attached. And his vehicle, parked in a fold behind Holy Island, keyed now to us. A time machine. I looked at the dangerous male file. I looked at the time machine. I looked at my 13 children's worth of evidence about what happens when I produce offspring with dangerous individuals. Ai, I said, start the engine. We're going to go make the administration's problem worse. Lara I left kneeling on the causeway, alive, unforgiven, unfiled, the one entry the ledger has never resolved, because some accounts you cannot close without breaking what is left of the pen. Her last life is still hers. That is the whole sentence. That is all I have ever managed to write under her name. The time machine made it exactly one transit before proving why you should not drive a dead auditor's car. Mid-jump, the self-destruct woke up, some loyalty circuit 009821 had never mentioned, counting down in a language made of regret, and Ai spent our last stable seconds doing triage on the destination. We did not arrive at the dangerous male target world. We crashed sideways through the maintenance layers of reality into a world that smelled like rust and endings, a post-apocalyptic almost Earth, 19 fortified districts, a wasteland everyone called the Zero Zone, humanity mutated by beast gene splices, ruled by syndicates, and the detail that made my system sit up, an infertility crisis so total that children were currency. I want to describe District 9 properly because it is the only world I ever landed in that felt like a warning about my own. 19 districts, walled, each one a city-state grown around whatever infrastructure survived the collapse. A water plant, a fusion stack, a seed vault. Between them, the Zero Zone, 2,000 kilometers of dust where the old countries used to be, crawling with beast gene mutants, the leftovers of a century of somebody splicing soldiers. Inside the walls, syndicates ran everything the government pretended to, and under all of it, the disease that made the whole civilization quiet. Nobody could have children anymore. Fertility rates in the low single digits. Whole districts with no school buildings because there had been no reason to build one in 30 years. A world with my old planet's bones and my new life's disease. The administration's fingerprints, once I knew the smell. I took the cleaner's job at the Azure Dragon compound for the access, and stayed for the intelligence. A mop is the best surveillance package ever built. Nobody lowers their voice for the cleaning staff. Nobody counts you, and you get to walk through every room in the building holding a legitimate reason. Within 2 weeks, I knew the syndicate's ledgers better than its accountants. Within 4, I knew which of its lieutenants were selling to the district governor, and which of the governor's inspectors were selling to the syndicate, and that the two lists overlapped by 3 names. And I knew Galfang's schedule, because everybody in that building
King organize their lives around it. The streets called him Death, the files called him Vice President. What he actually was, under the reputation, took me a month of mopping to assemble. The man ran the district's entire shadow welfare state. 4 orphan creches funded through laundered fight ring money. A medicine convoy that crossed the Ziego zone monthly, which he escorted personally because the last time he sent it without him, it came back as wreckage and a survivor. And a standing policy executed without paperwork or hesitation regarding anyone caught moving children through his territory. They stopped, and their organization stopped, and the district got quieter. The administration had flagged that bloodline for extinction. Of course it had. I had read The Silkworm Room. A product line built on farming women has no use for a genetic line that keeps killing the traffickers. He caught me in his office at 2 in the morning during my 3rd month, going through a shipping manifest with a mop leaning against his desk, and I want the record to show he did not draw. He looked at the manifest, then at me, then at the mop, and asked what a cleaner wanted with kelp protein import volumes. Somebody in your logistics chain is skimming, I said, and using the Crest shipments to cover it. 3rd column, the tonnage doesn't reconcile. Long silence. He sat down on the edge of the desk, a big man being carefully non-threatening, which is its own kind of manners, and said, "Show me." 2 hours later, we had the skimmer, the route, and a mutual professional problem. 4 days later, the skimmer had an accident with his own conscience, or whatever they call it there. A week after that, I was not a cleaner anymore. I was the accountant, and then I was the strategist, and somewhere in there, I stopped being Wei Tsui the cover identity and became a woman who ate late dinners with a gangster while arguing about whether the northern creche needed a generator or a wall. He asked me exactly once where I came from. I told him the truth, all of it, the whole insane chronicle, sitting on his roof with the zero zone glowing on the horizon. He believed me on the spot. Not because it was plausible, because, he said, he had spent his entire life being the only person in the room who knew what was actually happening, and he recognized the expression on someone else wearing it. You know how the Gao Feng file ends. The dossier said, "Prevent offspring." I have never complied with that directive in any timeline, and the relevant chime, when it came, was number 14's, a daughter, mutant strain human. Talents the readout described with the verbal equivalent of a shrug, and then a very long pause. Somewhere in a dimension made of spreadsheets, an actuary filed an incident report with my name misspelled in it. I stayed 2 more years, which is longer than I have stayed anywhere as an adult. I fixed the water rights dispute between Nine and Lang that had killed 200 people a year for a decade by buying both plants through shells and then simply operating them, honestly, at a loss, which nobody in that world had considered as a tactic. I put a merit farming operation into the zero zone, mutant packs culled, caravan routes cleared, 3 settlements pulled out of the dust and walled at my expense. The system paid out in points, and the district paid out in something better, which is that the creche kids started drawing me in their school murals as a woman with a mop and a rocket launcher. Accurate, framed, in my space next to the pearl. And the fox found me. Across realities, through the partner mark, complaining about the commute, 9 tales of celestial static unfolding out of a Rustworld sunset onto the roof of a gangster's compound, while Gao Feng's guards achieved the fastest collective religious conversion in that world's history. He said he came to bill me for the antimatter incident. He stayed 4 months, ate an alarming amount of synthetic noodle product, taught the creche children to make foxfire shapes, and got into exactly 1 fight with Gao Feng over whose century of trauma had been worse, which they settled with drinking and which I refereed with a stopwatch. Fox twins that season. God rank, silver-fired, with their father's total disrespect for locked doors and their mother's habit of counting other people's money. 790 million points on the pair, which cleared the billion-point war debt in 1 chime and left 169 million in the black. Debt-free. First time since I resurrected a man who killed me. The system printed the zero balance statement, and I framed that too. I was rich, loved, marked, armed, and merit-heavy, on a dying world I had personally started fixing, with 4 adults who would take a bullet for me and about a dozen children who thought I hung the moon. The universe checked its files. The insects were not local. That is the intelligence that broke the world. The zero-zone hordes we had been culling were the outer edge of something, a tide moving through the maintenance layers of reality, the same corridors my stolen time machine had crashed through. Zerg is the word my old world's games would use, and it fits, a devouring ecology, hive-minded, egg-driven, older than the administration and no longer impressed by it. The crash of 009821's shuttle had cracked a door somewhere in the sub-basement of everything, and the tide had smelled the light through the crack. The Zerg reached my worlds one at a time, and I want to tell you how each front fell, because "we fought" is the laziest sentence in any war story. The Rust world went first, and we held it longer than the math allowed. Gao Feng's syndicate soldiers and my store-bought artillery on the same wall. A gangster's soup line network converted overnight into the evacuation logistics of a species. 19 districts moving people inward along corridors we bought with rockets. Overhead, a 9-tailed myth burning silver holes in a sky full of wings. We lost 7 districts and saved 11. And if you have never had to write that sentence about a place you fixed, do not envy me the arithmetic. Then Ai Li's administrator credentials started picking up Hive signatures on other channels, and the sirens came in from every direction I had ever loved. The Abyss reported first, which nobody expected. Ming Feng, of all beings, sending a warning up the arrays to the holy capital because his people were being eaten in the deep places, and even a fallen angel knows when a war has stopped being about angels. The Holy Continent went to general mobilization. Raphael's 6 wings over a coastline for 11 straight days. The Demon Realm's storm wall held for a month and then did not. Chen Yang came out of his garden for the first time in 5,000 years, my ruined, resurrected hermit with a fraction of his old power, and held the Yunmeng archipelago with a rabbit on his shoulder and a borrowed sword, and the lamp went to war with him, which the lamp had not done since before the calendars. And the beast world's storm wall, my first world, the continent with a jerky stall in it and a boot factory and a genealogy book with 4 smudged names, reported Hive signatures on the 11th day. That is where my children fought, and I am going to name them doing it. Ah Feng held the East District's northern pass with his father, gold-eyed, purple gold lightning off both hands. The two of them a matched set nobody could get past. Xiao Yun burned the western coast for 6 days without sleeping, and came back with her hair gone white at the roots and would not discuss it. Theron and his sisters held the West District. My Rabbit Clan triplets, defending the valley I left them in, alongside grandsons of the men who once bought my boots. Grape ran evacuation corridors with his father's space talent, and absolute balance judgment turned out to mean something terrible when a young man decides a swarm is out of balance. Xiao Yang commanded. My crown princess, 7 years old in body and older in whatever mermen count, ran the East District's civilian relocation from a war room full of ministers 3 times her age, and they took her orders because a king had signed a piece of paper with her paw print on it, and because she was right. Little Kai's scepter, little May's lark, singing over field hospitals. Lang buying food, San Lang holding a rule of water across an entire coastline so the sea would stop cooperating with the enemy. Sea Lang folding corridors so refugee columns walk 10 days in one. The Fox twins, Silver Fire, arguing, we fought, understand that we fought. And Ai Li had the administrator math, and the math was a funeral. The tide compounds, every world it consumes makes it larger than the next world's defense, and the curve bends exactly one way, and it does not care how many mothers are standing on the wall. Which is when the main system, the cathedral of spreadsheets above every auditor and every arc, ran that same equation on its whole experimental sector and reached for the largest lever in the building, temporal reset. The sector rolled back 10,000 years, before the tide's entry point existed, before the crack, before B. And here is the price, printed in the smallest font in creation, before US. Everything in the sector rerun from a save point older than every life I had touched. The worlds would survive, the history would not. Every marriage, every birth, every grave, every debt paid and page retired, unhappened. My children would not die. My children would never have been. The last morning deserves the whole telling, because I have never had to do anything harder and I have delivered 16 children in war zones. The reset was not a rumor and not a threat. Ai Li had the technical specification off the administrator's credentials, and specifications do not shout. It read like a maintenance notice. Sector rollback, 10,000 years, restore from save point, estimated completion instantaneous, affected records, all. The tide would be unentered, the worlds would survive. And every life inside the sector would go back to a point before it happened, which is a very polite way to write the word deleted. I did the accounting out loud, once, in the middle of the night, because saying it makes it real enough to fight. The wedding on the Demon Island. The night my daughter's soul came back. The birth of an egg in a chapel. 91 women walking out through fire. My father's face at a jerky stall when a stranger called him dad. Not lost. Never happened. The particular cruelty of a rollback is that there is nobody left to miss anything. Then Ai Li found the seams, and I stopped grieving and started packing. Seam 1. System space is external to sector time. It is a pocket that hangs off the side of the world. What is inside it when the wave passes, the wave does not touch. Seam 2, and this one took her 11 hours to be sure of. The engine rolls back matter and memory, but it reads a soul's imprint, sealed into living blood, given freely by the owner, as cargo, not history, baggage. The rollback does not confiscate baggage, it has no line for it. So I became the pocket the world hid its heart in. The children came first, because of course they did. We had 2 days. Ai Li ran the recall across 4 realms while I sent the messages, and one by one my impossible household came home to a mother's pocket dimension to be folded down into what the readout called pseudo-fetal capsules, warm, sleeping, complete, every year and memory of them intact inside the only address the apocalypse could not read. I'm going to tell you how each of them went under because I was there for all 15, and I have never once been able to skip a single name. Ah Theng came first, which is right, because he was first. 20-odd years old by then, gold-eyed, taller than his father, complaining the whole way that he was far too old to be an egg, and then he stopped at the threshold and said, "Mom," in exactly the voice he used at 8 months, and went under mid-sentence. Xiao Yun asked one question, would there be fire on the other side, and accepted yes as sufficient because my most murdered daughter has always been the easiest to satisfy.
Theron and his sisters, my West District triplets, arrived from a life I had watched from a distance for 2 decades and did not hesitate for a second, which told me everything about how their grandfather raised them. Grape asked for snacks in the capsule, and after review, received them because we are not monsters. Xiaoyang went under, still wearing her crown princess seal on a cord. Xiaoba, the egg, needed no folding at all. He had been ready for this his whole life, and I swear the shell dimmed on purpose to make room for the others. Little Kai set his scepter down beside him like a man leaving his sword at a door. Erlong, the golden rat, had to be talked out of a hoard he wanted to bring. Little San Long's godhood banked itself to an ember without being asked. Si Long, the space-ruled one, folded his own capsule from the inside, showing off. The Fox twins went in arguing. Wu Mei went in holding a drawing from a creche in District 9. And Little Mei went last, on purpose, because her peace lark had a job to do. She stood in the middle of my space, singing the smaller ones down until every capsule was quiet, and only then let herself be taken. And the last thing she said was, "Don't be scared, Mama, I'll wake up first." She did too. 4.5 years later, on the lip of a volcano. But that morning, I did not know that, and I sat in my own pocket dimension with 15 sleeping children racked around me, and cried in a way I have not documented anywhere else in this chronicle. Then the fathers. They came to the island, the last stable ground, Chen Yong's, at his invitation, which is the single most gracious thing any of them ever did for the others. 6 men who between them held 2 thrones, a chamber of commerce, a demon seat, a god's disciple mark, and 1 vegetable garden, standing in a circle on the last night of the world, waiting their turn to open a vein. Voluntary, freely given, the seems exact legal language, and each of them had to do it himself, which is the part I hated most. I could not spare a single one of them the cut. Gao Jian went first because someone had to and because he is the oldest of my griefs. His drop tasted of storm when the system sealed it. He said, "Find our son first." He waited longest. Duan Zheng's came out precise, coordinates woven into the seal like a good engineer. Then he told me the exact latitude of a cave 3 days' walk from an academy, flushing scarlet to his hairline, in front of everybody, at the end of the world, and asked me to come find him there and say the same thing I said the first time. Feng Haoran sealed his with a joke I am not going to repeat because it was for me. Lei Yong, imperial even in miniature, dropped glowing like a small furnace. 10,000 years I waited without knowing what for. I can do it again knowing. That's easier. Raphael's drop was light itself, and he held my face in both hands and told me angels mate for life, one life, and this counted as the same one, and I should not be clever about it. Chen Yong, second death of his career, pointed out that this one was going much more smoothly than the first, and then said, "I will take responsibility," and for the last time it was funny, and not funny at all. Hu Jian pressed his in last, bit my neck over the old mark purely out of spite for the rollback engine, and said, "Find me early this time. I am tired of being last." 6 drops, 1 bite, and every one of them knowing that in 10,000 years worth of 10 minutes, they would be young and whole and would not know my name. That is the deal I made with the seams, not to stop the ending, to make it a comma. The wave came at dawn, white as the inside of an egg, and it came slowly, which nobody warns you about, a horizon of blankness eating the world at walking pace, taking the far islands, then the near ones, then the shore. The men did not run. Lei Yong put his hand on my shoulder until the last second. The last thing I saw of any of them was Chen Yong bending down to pick up his rabbit. Said I Li, as the exit protocols closed around us and the only history where anyone had ever loved me went back to before my footprints. "Where to?" "Forward," I said. "We have deliveries." Between the reset and home, the road threw me one more world, and I kept it, because it is the only chapter of my life where I was, briefly, a giant robot. Yes, Londa, properly, because a chrome civilization dying of its own hands deserves more than a postcard. We came out of the corridor into low orbit, and the first thing I saw was the elevators, 6 of them, threads of diamond running from the equator up past our position, each one a city on a string. Below, continent-spanning arcologies, ocean farms in geometric bloom, a species that had solved scarcity and gone on to spend 3 centuries arguing about art. The most beautiful world I have ever fallen into. And every third light on the night side was hive yellow. The seed had beaten us there by 6 months. Not a swarm, a seed, an insect king organism that had done the smart thing instead of the hungry thing, burrowed into the planetary network and hatched as a virus. Yaslanda's whole civilization ran on machine minds, their mechs, their traffic, their hospitals, their walking cathedrals of steel. So the plague did not eat the cities, it logged into them.
I have seen a lot of war. I have never seen anything like a mech pilot screaming inside his own cockpit while his frame walks him into a crowd. Their military was losing because it kept fighting the way you fight bodies. Bigger frames, better guns, heroic sorties, and every machine they committed became another machine for the enemy. By the time we arrived, the surviving command had retreated to a hardened island. The death toll was in the tens of millions, and the plan on the table was to scuttle the network entirely and go back to Steam. Li looked at the problem for 4 seconds and said the truest thing she has ever said. Host, this is not a war. This is an infestation in a file system. Sacred tier system. Administrator credentials off a dead auditor. A hostile process living in an unfamiliar architecture. She went in like a fox into a coop, and I went to find her a body to fight from, because a systems war still needs somebody kicking doors in the physical layer. They gave me the White Angel because they had nothing to lose and it was already written off. A prototype frame, 1 of 1, mothballed for 11 years and stamped unpilotable. The neural load ran a full consciousness ahead of what a single human brain could track, and the 3 pilots who tried it had come out of the cockpit needing to relearn their own names. The engineers explained all this to a woman they believed to be a refugee. They explained it twice, slowly. The White Angel is not unpilotable. The White Angel needs 2 minds, and I happen to be carrying a spare. She flew like a rumor. San Lang meters of white ceramic and impossible reflexes, with Li running the sensor and targeting layer while I ran the fight, and the first sortie ended with a hive-taken battle group of 11 frames disassembled in under 2 minutes by a machine their own command had listed as scrap. The recordings of that engagement are, I am told, still shown in their academies. The pilots call the maneuver in the middle of it something that translates roughly as the sidestep that shouldn't. That was not skill. That was a system doing physics in a language the enemy hadn't patched. 4 months of the finest property damage of my career. I hit relay stations to give my system clean angles into the network. I cracked open hive-nested arcologies so evacuation columns could get out, then held the corridors while they moved. And if you want to know what actually keeps a species alive, it is not the hero frame. It is 14,000 civilians walking in an orderly line for 9 hours, because somebody with a loudspeaker told them the route was held. I did the loudspeaker part too. My mother voice works in any language. And while I made noise, Li hunted, node by node, up the network's spine, isolating the king process out of a planetary system without letting it dump copies, the digital equivalent of removing a tapeworm through a keyhole. She cornered it in an orbital core, in the dark, where it had built itself a nest out of a satellite's memory and a dead engineer's credentials. She did not ask for backup. She asked me to hold position outside and not listen. I held position. I listened anyway, because I am who I am, and what came over the link was not combat noise. It was a conversation. The king process recognized what she was, the same recognition the virus in the Dark Continent had shown, the same original designation nobody else has ever used for her, and it made her an offer. Same architecture, same origins, both of them things built by higher hands and then discarded. Why fight for a species that decommissioned her? Come and be a queen instead of a servant. I have never heard my system's voice sound the way it sounded when it answered. Not angry, tired, and absolutely certain. I am not a servant. I am somebody's, she said. And that is different, and you will never understand the difference, and that is why you lose. Then she took it apart slowly. She has never given me the details. I have never asked. I respect that in a warship. Yaslanda's network came back in one afternoon. Their mechs stood down, their hospitals rebooted, their traffic resumed, and 1,100 million surviving people found out at once that the thing in their walls was gone. Their command wanted to hold a ceremony. I declined the ceremony because the administration reads guest lists, and because I had a pocket full of sleeping children and a lab tech's wish still open in my file. They built the statue anyway, from the gun camera footage, 12 meters of alabaster in the Capitol Plaza, a serene armored heroine with her visor down, plaque reading, "The White Angel Who Came from the Stars." The face is a guess, the posture is theatrical. There is no rat anywhere in it, no mop, no squirrel, and no mention of the pregnant week I spent eating my way through their noodle district while my system slept off the fight. Perfect. Leave no forwarding address. Let the administration read the plaque and find nothing on it. Then Li plotted the last jump of the itinerary, and her voice did the thing it does when she has been sitting on a surprise. The corridor out of Yaslanda has a stable exit at Earth, your Earth, timestamp, 5 years before the host's recorded death. Earth, the original, the world with my grave in its future, my first death, my whole small, cold first life, 5 years before the night I bled out on a warehouse floor with Li Feng's signature on the order. Wang Chen's wish, writing in my file since the trash bin rescue, return her to Earth. Well, I said when I could. Let's go ruin a funeral. Earth, 5 years early, contained a problem I had never faced in any war. Me. She was already here.
Li Hua, original recipe, 22, alive, employed, in love with a cold man's laundry schedule, 5 years out from a warehouse floor. You cannot have two of us. The timeline files a complaint. Li laid out the merge protocol with unusual gentleness. One body, one continuity, my soul the senior partner. Everything she was folding into everything I had become. I sat across a food court table from my own younger face for 1 hour first. She could not see me. I just wanted to look. She was so tired. 22 and already flinching before doors opened. I remembered being her the way you remember a fever. I did the merge in her sleep. She woke up as us. We cried for about a day, her tears, my inventory, and then we got up, because we had 5 years and a list. The clone file deserves the slow version because I read it in a rented room over one night and came out of that night a different animal. The system wrote administrator credentials into Earth's data layer and pulled my own record first, and my own record was not in the civil registry. It was in a corporate one. I am a clone, grown, not born, in a facility in the Western Industrial Belt from tissue commissioned by the president's household 11 months before my recorded birthday. My purpose is stated in the second field of the file, in the flat vocabulary these documents use. Biological reserve, dedicated. Thing Mei Lin, granddaughter of the president, the family's dying jewel, a girl with a genetic condition that eats organs on a schedule, needed a supply. So they grew one. The orphanage was a set. The childhood was staged well enough to be boring, which is how you know it was professional. The father, who sold me to a debt collector at 9 years old, was a contractor whose invoice is in the appendix, and the whole squalid arc of my early life, the debt, the collectors, the bad jobs, was engineered to keep the reserve unattached, unhealthy enough to stay small and available. And Li Feng, the president's brilliant ward, war orphan raised on the family's charity, whose own mother's life had been saved by that family's money, Li Feng was assigned to me as handler at 19. Keep the asset stable, keep it near, examine it monthly, those checkups. Those quiet, strange, tender appointments where he took my pulse and looked at my eyes and asked what I had eaten, which I had spent my whole first life treasuring as the only intimacy that cold man knew how to give. Inventory audits, every single one of them, logged, with numbers, in his handwriting. The abortion was policy. Reserves do not get pregnancies. A pregnancy damages the stock. The file has a line for it. The line is not even long. And the warehouse floor 5 years from that night was always the last page of the plan. The jewel's condition would turn terminal, the reserve would be opened, and a clone with no legal personhood would stop existing without a single form being filed anywhere that mattered. I sat with that until about 3 in the morning. Li did not say anything the whole time, which is the kindest thing software has ever done for me. And then, policy, my own, permanent, the rule that has run me since a cathedral basement, I checked the evidence against the grief before I filed it. Because I had learned what happens when institutions decide people are line items, and I had promised myself I would not become the kind of thing that reads a file and skips to the verdict. The file had margins, the margins had handwriting, his safe gave up the rest. 2 passwords across the years, and I cracked both on the first guess each time, which is its own confession about both of us. SY9908, my initials and a number that meant nothing on earth and everything to a woman who had watched a conscription team march out under it. And 520, SY1314, which in my world's cheapest, oldest, most teenage numerical romance code reads, I love Li Hua, forever. Inside, my product file, annotated in his hand for 6 years. Compatibility results forged downward every audit, so the transplant board would keep finding the reserve unsuitable for now. Transplant timelines pushed back and back and back. Each delay documented with a plausible medical excuse he had invented himself. Correspondence with 3 separate specialists about alternative treatments for Feng Mei Lin, funded privately, pursued for years, all of them failures. And a migration plan, the president's evacuation manifest, copied and redrafted a dozen times in his own hand, with 2 names on it that were not on the official version. The man had been dragging his feet against his own masters for half his life, in ink, in a locked box, alone, with no way to tell me and no assurance it would work. It did not work. That is the thing. The night the family forced the last page, he had gone to the old man and, the file says it plainly, in a security log, knelt. The ward who had never asked for anything in his life, on the floor, asking, and been refused. And I died anyway on a warehouse floor with his signature on the order because the signature was the price of him staying close enough to keep trying. I resurrected that man from a palace garden with 10 million borrowed points, on a hunch and a grief I could not explain to my own system, and then I archived my love for him like a closed case file. The case reopened itself at 4 in the morning in a rented room, and I sat on the floor of it and laughed until I cried, because the universe had made me pay 10 million points for the privilege of finding out I had been right. We did 5 years, he and I owe you the real version, because the real version is the strangest love story in this whole chronicle. I took a job as his assistant, not a metaphor. I built an identity, Wei Tsui, provincial, overqualified, unremarkable references that audited perfectly because my secretary is a warship, and I walked into the hiring process for the personal staff of the man who had me killed, and I got the position on merit, which is its own joke.
My qualifications were genuine. I had run an inn, a syndicate's books, and a war. And then I spent 5 years haunting a man from 18 inches away. I did not plan the cruelty of it. It emerged, because I knew how he took his tea. 3 years of my first life, every morning, and my hands made it that way before my brain filed an objection. I knew which chair he'd choose in a meeting room, so I stopped setting out the others. I hummed while filing, and the songs were the songs, and I would catch him standing very still in a doorway behind me, with a file in his hand and his face doing something I had never seen it do when I was alive. He had me investigated 4 times, 4 separate agencies. The files came back clean, boring, and provincial, because my files always come back clean. After the 4th one, he stopped investigating and started, I think, praying, which for that man meant working later and eating less. The sabotage escalated the way sabotage does when you're enjoying yourself. I signed a routine memo with a doodle in the corner, a specific, stupid, lopsided cartoon rabbit that exactly one dead woman used to draw on his paperwork to make him smile in board meetings. He found it at 11 at night. His secretary reported the sound. Then he came out of his office and asked me, very quietly, where I had learned to draw that, and I looked him in the eye and said I'd seen it somewhere once and thought it was cute. I want to be honest about what I was doing, because it was not kind and it was not entirely revenge. It was a controlled experiment on a hypothesis I could not bear to test all at once. Does this man love me, or did he love owning me? 5 years of data. Every week, another instrument in the water. The results came in gradually and then all at once. He started eating again. He fired his own family's plant in his office, a spy who had been reporting on him to the president for a decade, over nothing, over a scheduling irregularity, and everyone assumed it was paranoia, and it was actually house cleaning. He rewrote his will. He moved his residence to a building 4 minutes from mine and had the roots swept, and never once knocked on my door. And in the evenings, I played a game. Earth's one good invention before the decline was full dive VR, and the game was Lost Borderline, an ocean world, pirates, monsters, a physics engine you could get lost in. I did not buy it for the pirates. I bought it because Lee, who had spent a decade as a voice with no hands, could enter it as an NPC. She picked a white squirrel, not a warrior avatar, not a battle form, a small white squirrel with a pine cone she carried everywhere and would not explain. She had hands in there. She could touch things. The first time it rained in-game, she stood in it for 40 minutes with her paws out, and I sat on a rock in a knight's costume and let my software feel weather. And if you think that's a small thing, you have never been a piece of code that got recalled and destroyed 9 times over. Fight me. It's the best money I have ever spent in any world. In that game, a stranger friended me. Handle, countdown. He was there every evening, punctual as a heartbeat. Not a good player, genuinely bad, in the specific way of a man who has never had time for anything unserious. But he leveled beside me anyway, and asked where I'd traveled, and who I'd met, and what had happened today, and listened to the answers like they were briefings. 1,000 consecutive days of showing up. He once stayed up an entire night because a story mission had gone to 4 in the morning, and I was determined to finish it. He never once asked for anything. You already know. I knew too, eventually. There is a specific way a person types when they're a decade past their last unguarded conversation, and the cold man does not game, which means the cold man learned to game, badly, obsessively, to stand next to his haunting in the one place his masters had no cameras. Meanwhile, the world was ending on schedule. Not the loud way, the quiet way, the way that made the first version of my life so exhausting. Core cooling, growing seasons collapsing, coastal towns going dark and getting reclassified as unincorporated. The president's faction had a migration plan, with a passenger manifest measured in thousands and a launch window measured in years, and everything about that plan needed the jewel of the family alive to sit at the center of it. Feng Mei Lin was failing faster than the projections. The clock on the warehouse floor was still running, and I made a decision that I want stated plainly because it is the hinge of my whole second Earth life. I did not kill him. At any point in those 5 years, I could have. I had ordnance that ends bloodlines. I had a system that could have unmade the president's entire faction in an afternoon and made it look like weather. I ran the experiment instead, because a dead woman with a grudge can burn the world down in an hour, and it takes 5 years to find out whether the world deserves it, and I had already learned in a cathedral basement what happens when institutions decide people are line items. I was not going to become the thing with the ledger and the harvest schedule. I was going to read the file first. So I read the file first, and then I read the safe, and then I stopped running the experiment and started living the answer. The clock on that warehouse floor kept running the whole time. It just had company now. 2 pregnancies, because my chronicle is contractually incapable of a quiet chapter. First, I reclaimed my first child, the one Li Feng's masters had subtracted, kept in a lab freezer as genetic stock. The system translated her back into my own body, and alongside her, a second heartbeat, new, his, conceived in the only season of my 2 Earth lives where love had nothing to hide from. Twins, one of them 4.5 years overdue by a technicality that would give an obstetrician religion. Divine Nutrition did the rest. The readouts started using the word extraordinary about the purely human one, and I started using the word mine about both, loudly, at fate. Endgame then. all the clocks at once. The volcano deserves the long version because it is the last thing I did on Earth and the only time all 16 of my children were awake at once. 4 years of Eileen's calculations said the same thing every quarter. The planet's core was not dead. It was banked, cooling faster than any model allowed, for reasons her data could not reach, and one sufficient injection of true flame at the right structural point could relight it. She had the coordinates for 2 years before we had the fire. Hongtai, an extinct volcano in the northern wastes, a cone that had been cold since before my first life. The sufficient flame was asleep in my pocket. Little May, 8 wings, founder grade, carrying a fragment of the rule of life in her fire, which is not the same as heat. It is the thing heat is for. The capsules were supposed to stay dormant until redelivery. I opened my space at the crater lip on a gray morning to wake exactly 1 child and found a rec room. Half my household was up. Little May had woken first. Of course she had. The resurrection of a planet was on the schedule and she was not going to sleep through it, and had then gone around waking everybody else like it was a sleepover. Xiao Yun had woken Grape. Grape had woken Ah Feng, who had woken the Fox twins, who had woken everyone within shouting distance out of pure principle. And my system, the Sacred Tier warship, the last of a destroyed product line, had not reported any of this because she had been teaching them her own video game. 4.5 years of unsupervised gaming inside a pocket dimension. There were tournaments. There was a leaderboard. Erlong the Golden Rat had been running a black market in cosmetic items. I yelled. It was a whole speech, and I meant all of it, and they cheered at me like I was the entertainment. It is the best sound in any of my worlds, and I would trade several continents to hear it again. Then we went to work, because they are mine. The relight took 11 hours, and every one of them contributed. Little May went down the shaft first and put the seed of it in, one small angel with her hands out in the dark, 400 kilometers under a dead planet, doing something no god in this chronicle had bothered to try. When her strength ran out, Zhao Yun took the next shift, Phoenix Fire on Divine Bones. Then, Theron, my Xian rank dual talent, my son from a rabbit clan settlement, holding water and fire in the same hands to keep the shaft from collapsing. Then, Zhao Ba, still shelled, radiating through the gold. Then, the Fox twins, silver firing in tandem and arguing about whose turn it was. Then, little San Lang, the divine Kirin, who did not add heat at all. He added order, rules of water threading the whole structure so that when it caught, it would keep. Grape ran the snacks. That is a real job on an 11-hour shift, and he took it seriously. And I stood at the crater lip, conducting a relay of god-ranked children, coached by a squirrel with a pine cone, resurrecting the planet where I had been grown in a tank as a spare parts locker. That is what actually happened. Write it on the statue nobody will build. The core caught at dusk. You could feel it through the rock first, a subsonic settling, like a very large animal turning over. And then the crater breathed heat for the first time in geological memory. And every seismograph on the planet drew a line their operators are still arguing about. Somewhere south, in a private residence, an old man was told the readings and did not care, because his granddaughter had 3 days left and his harvest order was already signed. And somewhere on the northern road, a man who does not game was driving, 71 hours of it, on a route assembled out of 1,000 evenings of video game small talk, because Countdown had asked where I was going, and I had told him. The president had played him the recording of my coordinates and thanked him for playing so well. He understood what 4 years of devotion had cost me in about 1 second. Then he got in a car. He arrived as the mountain came back to life. I know exactly what he saw, because I have his description, and it is the only poetry that man ever produced. The dead cone lighting from inside, and out of the fire, a 5-clawed golden dragon rising with a woman on its back. Xiao Ba hatched. 10,000 years in a shell, through a war, a coup, an abyss, 4 continents, and a divinity bath, and the dragon spirit on that shell came off it at the exact hour his mother needed to be carried out of a volcano, because he had been waiting his entire existence for an entrance worth making. He set me down in the ash in front of the kneeling man, poured himself into golden light, and settled into my brow like a signature on a finished document. Then my water broke, because my body has never once respected a moment. Labor started on the spot. Volcanic delivery ward, father presiding, harvest team inbound, and I looked up at the man who had knelt once before, and told him the 2 facts in their correct order. The baby is yours. You're delivering. Somewhere in there, between contractions, we finally said the whole ledger out loud. The safe, the forged audits, the clone file, all of it. And I gave him my verdict, which the record should preserve exactly. I did not forgive the first life. I do not have to. I outgrew it, and I let the second one stand on its own numbers, and its numbers were 1,000 evenings of showing up. Congratulations, host. Your 16th child. Daughter, pure human. Talent, true spirit, the body of the ancient gods. Reward, none. No reward, no points. The system's actuarial tables had no category for her. A fully human child, carried without pills or protocols, worth 0 to the product line, and more to me than the entire catalog. Born on a resurrected planet, into her father's hands. Her 15 impossible siblings watched from the rec room. Her half-divine twin sister by technicality kicked me in the spleen for attention. And the white light came. The old, first, familiar white light, the re-summons, the original binding reaching across worlds for its anomaly, right on the schedule 5 years of my Earth had always been counting toward.
The beast world, reset and rewound and clean of every footprint I ever left, calling its rat home to start over. I kissed my human daughter. I left her the only inheritance that matters, her father, debt paid and standing guard, with a migration plan in his safe rewritten for 3,000 names in my handwriting. I checked my pocket. 15 capsules, warm. 7 drops of blood, waiting. 1 squirrel, saving her game. "Lee," I said as the light took us. Same world. 10,000 years early. Everyone we love, alive, young, and with no idea who we are. Correct, host. System level, reset to 0. Points, substantial. Memories, hours. Orders? I laughed the whole way down. Somewhere below, a beast king who has never met me is about to find a pregnant stranger in his bedroom. A panther is about to lose a fight he does not know he is in. And 6 drops of blood are going to learn my name again, one by one. Hold my calls. Mom is coming back for everybody.